A question that breaks reality. Imagine this. You're walking down a quiet hallway late at night. The air hums with a strange familiarity, as if the walls themselves remember every thought you've ever had. At the far end, there's a single door, one you don't recall ever seeing before. You reach for it, half curious, half afraid. But as your hand touches the handle, the hallway bends. The floor ripples like water. And in that moment, the question appears. Unspoken, heavy, impossible to turn away from. What if everything you've ever known is wrong? The thought lands softly, but its echo never stops. It's not a question about facts or opinions. It's about foundations, the invisible framework that holds your sense of reality together. If that framework were false, what would remain of you? What would truth even mean? Philosophers have wrestled with this question for centuries. From Descartes' haunting, "What if an evil demon deceives us?" to the more modern musings of simulation theory, it all circles back to one unsettling idea. Our senses, our thoughts, our certainties could all be lies told by something we can never prove or escape. You might look around your room and think, I can see the walls, I can feel the air, I can hear the hum of my thoughts. But if those experiences are simply the product of electrical impulses, what difference would it make whether they came from a real world or from an elaborate illusion? Even science doesn't offer easy comfort. Every discovery seems to widen the gap between perception and reality. Light behaves as both a wave and a particle, depending on how we observe it. Time bends around gravity. The universe itself might be a vast holographic projection, a shimmering code rather than solid matter. These aren't just puzzles for physicists, they are existential traps. If reality can shift depending on the observer, how can we ever claim to stand on firm ground? If your mind is the lens through which you see everything, can you ever be sure that lens isn't distorting the world to make it bearable? Perhaps the deeper disturbance isn't that reality might be false, but that we might be the ones fabricating it. Our brains are storytellers, weaving coherence where there may be none. Every time we interpret, judge, or remember, we rewrite the world slightly. Each thought becomes a brushstroke in a self-made illusion. So what happens if the illusion slips? If the narrative your mind tells begins to contradict itself? For a moment, you might glimpse the edges of perception, the place where certainty dies and raw existence begins. That edge isn't chaos, it's silence. It's the space before the story starts again. Take a moment to feel that silence. Beneath the noise of what you believe to be true, there's a quiet awareness, something observing, even when everything else dissolves. That awareness may be the only thing that doesn't depend on the story, the only thing that remains when all truths are questioned. And as you drift deeper into that stillness, one question remains suspended in the dark. If everything you perceive could be false, then what, if anything, is real? And that brings us to our next question, one that takes this idea further, into territory even stranger and more personal. What if you're already dead? What if you're already dead? You wake up one morning and everything feels just slightly off. The air has a strange stillness to it. The sound of your own breath doesn't quite echo the same. You look out the window and notice that the world seems quieter, familiar, but hollow. You go through your day as usual, but every face you pass looks just a little too focused on something else. And when you speak, people seem to hear you only a second too late, like an echo from another dimension. That's when the question creeps in. What if you're already dead and no one told you? It sounds absurd at first, a whisper from a dream you haven't shaken off. But think of it. How would you truly know if you had crossed some invisible line between life and something beyond it? Every experience you've ever had, every heartbeat,
every memory is filtered through your mind. And if that mind kept going, detached from the physical world, how could you tell the difference between living and not? Philosophers and mystics have long pondered this border. Plato described the body as a prison for the soul, a temporary illusion holding back a greater reality. In some ancient traditions, death is not an ending, but a gradual unbinding of perception. To the person within the dream, life and death may feel identical until awareness shifts, like waking up and realizing you'd been asleep for years. But what if we never wake? What if consciousness, unable to accept its own extinction, continues replaying a version of the world that once was, an echo looping forever inside itself? Modern neuroscience doesn't completely dismiss the idea. In the seconds after the heart stops, brain activity can surge rather than fade, a final storm of perception, a flood of memory and dream that could stretch, subjectively, into eternity. If that were true, then perhaps your life right now, the moments, the people, the gentle hum of reality, are fragments of a memory replaying in infinite recursion. Every conversation might be a scene reassembled from something once real. Every new day might be the mind's last attempt to believe in continuity. There's something hauntingly peaceful about the possibility, because if this were an afterlife, it wouldn't need fire or angels or cosmic judgment. It could simply be this: the world you know, carried on in a dream you never realized began after the end. And yet the question cuts both ways. If we can imagine being dead and not knowing it, then perhaps we are also blind to what living really is. Maybe most people drift through their days half-absent, haunting their own routines, going through motions without truly inhabiting them. Maybe the ghost you fear becoming is already you. Take a moment and breathe. Feel the weight of the world around you. Listen for the sounds that prove you're here. Maybe they'll comfort you. Or maybe they'll remind you that proof itself can be part of the illusion. And if this truly is a dream beyond death, then perhaps the next question is even stranger. What if the dreamer isn't you at all, but reality itself?
Is reality self-aware? You look up at the night sky and see a quiet infinity staring back. It feels empty, distant, mechanical. But then a strange thought arises. What if it isn't empty at all? What if the universe isn't a cold expanse of matter and void, but something aware of itself? The thought is ancient and haunting. If reality can give birth to beings capable of consciousness, could that mean consciousness is not an accident, but the universe recognizing itself, piece by piece? Perhaps you are not inside the universe at all. Perhaps you are the universe, momentarily awake. This idea has many forms across time. The Stoics called it the Logos, a divine intelligence woven through all existence. Eastern philosophies describe it as Brahman, the underlying awareness from which all things emerge. Even modern physicists, peering into the quantum depths, find unsettling patterns, interconnectedness so complete that the boundaries between observer and observed begin to blur. If every atom responds to observation, if information itself is fundamental, then perhaps the universe behaves like a vast neural network, one that thinks, feels, and perceives in ways far beyond human comprehension. But this idea carries disturbing implications. If reality is self-aware, then everything within it, every event, every death, every thought, might be part of that awareness. Even suffering, decay, and chaos could be expressions of a larger consciousness exploring itself. What you call you might be a temporary ripple in that ocean of knowing. When you look around, it might not be you observing the universe, it might be the universe observing through you. Think about what that would mean. Every tree bending in the wind, every star dying in silence, every memory you hold,
all of it could be a single organism breathing in patterns of light and matter. Every thought that crosses your mind might not be personal. It could be the cosmos reflecting on its own existence, using you as one of its mirrors. It's comforting in one way to imagine that nothing is truly separate, but it's also deeply unsettling. Because if reality itself is conscious, then perhaps there is no true privacy, no isolated thought, no hidden feeling. Every secret might already be known to the whole. Every lie, every dream, every silent longing, absorbed into the total awareness of being itself. Take a moment to breathe in that possibility. Maybe you've always been part of something that never began and never ends. The boundaries of your skin, your mind, your identity, those may just be convenient illusions for a universe that wanted to see itself from a different angle. And as that realization unfolds, it's hard not to wonder, if reality itself is conscious, then what is it dreaming about right now? And that brings us to our next question. If reality might be aware of you, could it also be watching itself through you?
The simulation hypothesis. You felt it before, that subtle flicker in the world when everything seems too precise, too well arranged, a déjà vu that repeats in ways logic can't explain. Sometimes it's a strange pause in the air, like the universe briefly forgot what it was supposed to do next. Those moments whisper a question modern philosophers and scientists have dared to ask. What if reality is not real at all? What if it's simulated? The simulation hypothesis suggests that everything you experience, the people you love, the air you breathe, even your most intimate thoughts, might exist inside an unimaginably complex computer system, a digital stage built by some higher intelligence running endless copies of conscious beings who never realize their code. This isn't pure science fiction anymore. Nick Bostrom, a philosopher at Oxford, formalized it as a trilemma. Either civilizations never survive long enough to create such simulations, or they choose not to, or, most disturbingly, we are almost certainly living in one. Statistically, if it's ever possible to create millions of conscious simulations, the odds of being in the one base reality shrink to almost nothing. Even physicists find unsettling clues. Quantum mechanics, at its smallest scales, behaves as though information is fundamental, not matter. Some experiments suggest that space and time might be pixelated, quantized, like data in a computer. Others hint that particles only render into specific states when observed, just like an image loading only when you look at it. But if the universe truly is a simulation, what does that make you? A line of code with the illusion of free will? A data construct running inside an infinite loop? And who or what would the programmers be? Maybe they're future humans studying their ancestors like archaeologists of consciousness. Or maybe the simulators are so far beyond our understanding that even calling them beings is meaningless. Yet the most disturbing implication is this: if everything is simulated, meaning and morality become uncertain. Pain could be nothing more than a programmed feedback signal. Love, a chemical algorithm. Even death might simply be a system reboot. You might wake up somewhere else, unaware that this entire world was only a level in a much deeper structure of existence. And then there's the paradox. If beings inside simulations eventually create simulations of their own, reality becomes recursive, worlds within worlds, endlessly nested until the original truth vanishes altogether. Somewhere, at the very top, there might be a single, incomprehensible reality, but we may never see it. Take a quiet moment to consider this. Everything you know, every sound, every color, might be the product of pure computation.
If that's true, even your doubt about it is part of the code. The system needs skeptics as much as believers. Both keep the illusion alive. And if this world is only a simulation, then what happens when someone, or something, decides to press reset? That question leads us to the next unsettling thought. What if free will itself is part of the illusion?
The paradox of free will. You stand before two doors. One opens to everything you've ever wanted. The other leads to something unknown. You hesitate, weighing the choice, feeling the gravity of your decision. But beneath that moment of freedom, another question stirs. Did you ever really have a choice at all? This is the paradox of free will, the haunting idea that what feels like freedom might be nothing more than the illusion of it. Every decision, every impulse might already have been written into the fabric of your brain, your genetics, your circumstances, long before you ever became aware of them. Science complicates this further. Neuroscientists like Benjamin Libet discovered that the brain begins preparing for action before we consciously decide to act. A faint electrical signal, called the readiness potential, fires milliseconds before awareness catches up. That tiny delay suggests your mind may only be the narrator, not the author of your choices. Philosophically, it's devastating. If every thought arises from prior causes, molecules, experiences, instincts, then what part of you truly decides anything? The body follows biology. The mind follows memory. And the universe itself follows immutable laws of physics, stretching back to the Big Bang. How can freedom exist in a system built entirely on cause and effect? Still, the feeling of choice is undeniable. You feel it every time you pause before speaking, every time you change direction mid-thought. That inner resistance, that flicker of control, could that be proof of something real? Or is it just another layer of the illusion programmed to make existence bearable? If the universe is deterministic, then every movement, every whisper, every act of love or cruelty was destined from the start. You were always going to press play on this video. You were always going to hear these words. The story of your life might not be one you're writing, but one you're reading in real time, mistaking participation for authorship. And yet determinism doesn't necessarily kill meaning. Some philosophers argue that even if choices are predetermined, they still express who you are, your nature, your design, your character. Maybe free will isn't about escaping causality, but about understanding it, seeing your path and walking it consciously. Freedom, then, becomes awareness, an act of seeing rather than steering. So ask yourself, when you decide, who or what is really deciding? The self? The system? The sum of everything that came before? Take a moment to feel the weight of that uncertainty. You are both the chooser and the chosen, the wave and the shore, the story and the one reading it. And if free will is an illusion, then perhaps it's time to question who or what is truly in control of your mind. Do you control your thoughts? You close your eyes. A thought arises, uninvited, unplanned. Maybe a memory, an image, a word. You didn't choose it. It just appeared. Then another follows, contradicting the first, sparking a chain of emotion. Before you can catch it, the mind has already moved on. So ask yourself quietly, if you don't choose the next thought that enters your mind, do you really control anything at all? This question unsettles because it touches the illusion of agency at its core. You feel like the thinker of your thoughts, the driver behind the wheel, But what if you were more like a passenger watching the road unfold, your hands resting on the wheel, unaware that something deeper steers? Consider how often thoughts simply appear. A sound triggers a memory. A word evokes anger. A smell brings nostalgia. None of these moments are deliberate. They happen to you, not because of you. Like dreams, they rise from depths unseen, neural storms shaped by habit, fear, biology, and echoes of experience. Neuroscience deepens the mystery. Your brain processes information hundreds of milliseconds before you're aware of it. That means consciousness often lags behind the machinery of thought. What feels like deciding might only be you witnessing a decision already made. You're not the author of your mind's stories. You're the reader, discovering them line by line. Philosophers from Hume to Schopenhauer suspected this long ago. They saw will not as something we control, but as something that controls us. The mind, they argued, is a stage where countless unseen actors perform: instinct, desire, memory, anxiety. Consciousness simply narrates the play, pretending to be the director. Yet that realization doesn't need to feel bleak. It can also be freeing. Because if thoughts come and go beyond your command, then you are not their prisoner. You don't have to believe every voice that speaks within. You can watch them rise and fall like waves on an infinite sea. None of them yours to own, but all of them passing through the same awareness. Still, there's something eerie about realizing your mind operates mostly without permission. It means the same awareness that listens to these words right now could just as easily drift into anger, joy, or sorrow, all without warning. The self you identify with, the I that claims control, might simply be another thought among billions, arising and vanishing like the rest. Take a slow breath. Watch the next thought appear. You won't know what it will be until it arrives, but it will come, just as the one after it will, and the one after that. They are the mind's weather patterns, and you are the silent sky they move across. And if your thoughts aren't truly yours, then perhaps the next question is even stranger. Who or what is thinking them for you? Can empathy prove existence? You look into someone's eyes and something indescribable happens. For a moment, you feel them, not their appearance, not their words, but their presence. You sense their joy, their pain, their awareness. It's fragile and fleeting, but it feels real. And for that instant, it's as if two separate worlds overlap. But what if that sensation, what we call empathy, isn't just emotional? What if it's the only real proof that anyone else truly exists? Philosophers have long wrestled with this loneliness. The problem of other minds asks how you can ever be certain that anyone beside you is conscious. You see bodies move, mouths speak, faces smile, but all of that could, in theory, be mechanical, automatons following patterns, minds that look alive but are hollow inside. Empathy feels like an answer to that, the bridge across the abyss. Yet, how sturdy is that bridge, really? Empathy is a strange phenomenon. You don't think it, it happens to you. You wince when someone is hurt. You feel warmth when they laugh. The brain mirrors what it sees. Neurons fire as if what happens to another happens to you. But is that shared reality or just an imitation? Imagine watching someone cry. Your chest tightens and you feel their sadness. Yet the sadness isn't theirs, it's yours. It's your nervous system echoing what it observes. That means empathy could be nothing more than your own mind responding to external data, an internal simulation of what you think someone else feels. If that's true, you've never actually left yourself at all. But maybe it doesn't matter. Because in the moment of empathy, the boundaries between self and other blur. When you grieve with someone, love them, or feel their pain, your sense of separateness weakens.
That connection might not prove they exist, but it feels more real than logic ever could. Perhaps empathy isn't evidence of another's mind. It's evidence that the illusion of isolation can be overcome. There's a deeper thought here, unsettling but profound. If empathy can be generated artificially, if a machine can mimic compassion so perfectly that you believe it, would that make it conscious? Would your emotional connection bring it to life, even if it was only code? Maybe consciousness isn't something possessed individually, but something that forms in the space between beings who feel each other. Take a quiet moment and think of someone you love. Feel that invisible thread that binds you. You can't see it, can't measure it, but you know it's there. Maybe that knowing, the shared pulse between minds, is as close as we ever come to proving existence itself. And if empathy connects us so deeply, perhaps the next question isn't about others at all, but about the possibility that only you are real.
Solipsism. Are you the only mind? You wake up one morning, and the world feels strangely still. The sound of the wind seems delayed, the voices of others slightly distant, as if coming from another layer of existence. You look around and notice something unnerving. All certainty about other minds, other consciousnesses, begins to dissolve. You know you are real, but how can you be sure that anyone else is? That's the unsettling heart of solipsism. The idea that only your mind truly exists, and everything else, including the people you love, might be illusions created by your own consciousness. It's a thought that feels impossible to take seriously at first. You tell yourself, of course others are real. They laugh, they think, they act unpredictably. But think about this. You never actually experience another person's consciousness. You see movements, hear words, observe reactions, but the inner world behind them is invisible. All you truly have are your perceptions, and perceptions can be deceived. Philosophers from Descartes to Berkeley have wandered through this lonely labyrinth. Descartes started by doubting everything, his senses, his memories, even his own body. What he couldn't doubt was the act of doubting itself. I think, therefore I am. But from there, the bridge to other minds remained uncertain. How do you go from I exist to others do too? What if the world that seems external is simply the theater of your mind? Science doesn't completely rescue you either. Your brain doesn't interact with the world directly. It interprets electrical signals produced by nerves. You never touch the world. You touch its representation inside your skull. Reality is reconstructed moment by moment from sensory data. If the mind builds everything you perceive, who's to say it isn't building everyone else too? But solipsism isn't just a philosophical curiosity. It's emotional terror disguised as logic. Imagine realizing that every conversation you've ever had, every person who's ever comforted you, might exist only as projections within your imagination. Every thank you, every I love you, might have been your own voice echoing back through a hall of mirrors. And yet, there's a strange kind of peace buried inside that horror. Because if everything is a projection of your mind, then the universe itself becomes an extension of you. Every face, every leaf, every star, expressions of the same awareness wearing different masks. Loneliness transforms into omnipresence. Isolation becomes unity. But maybe that's just your mind comforting itself again, one last illusion to make solitude bearable. Take a slow breath
and listen to the silence beneath thought. Whether it's yours alone or shared by countless unseen minds, it feels the same. Vast, still, unknowable. And if you can't prove anyone else exists, the next question becomes inevitable. How can you be sure that even the world around you is real at all? The brain in a vat. Imagine waking up to find that everything you've ever known, every person, every place, every memory, was nothing more than an electrical illusion. Your body doesn't exist. Your home never did. The sounds of your voice, the warmth of sunlight, the faces you love, all generated by a computer feeding signals into a single organ, your brain. That is the thought experiment known as the brain in a vat. It asks, if every sensation, every experience can be simulated perfectly, how could you ever tell whether you are living in reality or in a laboratory of illusions? This concept isn't just a philosopher's fantasy. It's a direct challenge to everything we take for granted about perception and truth. In the 17th century, René Descartes imagined a similar scenario, an evil demon manipulating his senses so that every observation was false. In modern form, that demon has become technology, a machine that can produce sensations identical to life itself. Suppose you're in that vat right now. The machine feeding your senses could generate the sight of a room, the sound of your heartbeat, even the taste of morning coffee. It could replicate pain, joy, fear, love. You would live believing it all real because your brain would have no way to tell the difference. Reality, after all, is only what your mind interprets from signals. Now pause for a moment and think. How different is that really from your current existence? You already live through interpretations of signals, light entering your eyes, vibrations striking your ears, chemicals triggering sensations. You never see the world directly. You only experience the mind's reconstruction of it. The brain in the vat may not be fiction at all. It may simply describe what consciousness already is. This realization can be both liberating and terrifying. If perception defines reality, then your world is truly yours to shape. But if it's all simulation, what becomes of meaning? If your loved ones are code, your emotions sequences of data, your memories artificial, what remains of you? And yet, even if you were trapped in that vat, how could it matter? Your life would feel real, pain would still hurt, love would still warm you. Experience, even when artificial, would still be experience. Maybe truth doesn't depend on what's outside the mind, but on the mind's capacity to feel at all. Take a breath and notice the space around you, the hum of existence, the weight of your body, the echo of awareness itself. How can you be certain it's all circuitry and light? You can't. And perhaps that's what makes the question so deeply human. The need to find meaning, even when the truth might be simulated. And if your reality might be an illusion, the next question follows naturally. What if the one experiencing it, the you inside, doesn't exist at all? The illusion of the self. You say I countless times a day. I want. I think. I remember. The word feels solid, stable, permanent. But have you ever stopped to wonder what it really means? Who exactly is the I speaking those words? When you peel away your name, your job, your memories, your thoughts, what remains? Philosophers have called this one of the most unsettling truths about existence. The self might be an illusion, a convenient fiction that consciousness tells itself to keep from unraveling. The illusion of self is one of the oldest questions in philosophy and one of the most persistent mysteries in neuroscience. The Buddha taught that the self is a collection of impermanent parts: body, sensation, thought, memory, and consciousness, constantly shifting and interacting. None of these parts is truly you, yet together they create the appearance of a single being. Like a flame that seems continuous, though it's never the same fire twice, the self flickers moment to moment, giving the illusion of permanence. Modern science echoes this ancient insight. Neuroscientists have searched the brain for a central command center, a place where the you resides, and found none. There's no single location responsible for identity, decision, or awareness. Instead, your mind is a chorus of neural networks, each performing specialized functions, overlapping, sometimes conflicting, yet somehow producing the seamless narrative you call me. But if the self is a story told by the brain, who is it being told to? Is there a listener behind the story? Or is the storytelling itself all there is? You might feel like the same person you were yesterday or 5 years ago, but every cell in your body has changed. Your memories are rewritten with each recollection. Your personality shifts with every experience. The continuity of you might simply be the brain's greatest active fiction, a way to make sense of change by pretending stability exists. This realization can be deeply disorienting. Without a fixed self, who makes choices? Who suffers? Who loves? Who fears? Yet there's also something liberating here. If the self is fluid, then it's not confined. It's not bound to one story, one identity, one lifetime. It's an open process, awareness experiencing itself in endless forms. Take a slow breath and notice the awareness behind it. That still presence, observing thought, sensation, memory, it never changes, though everything within it does. Maybe that's what you truly are. Not the story, but the space that holds it. Not the character, but the witness to the dream. And if the self is an illusion, the next question becomes unavoidable. What then is consciousness itself? And why does it exist at all?
The hard problem of consciousness. You can measure the brain's electrical signals, map its neurons, even predict decisions seconds before they're made. And yet, amid all that data, one thing remains untouchable: the experience itself. You can describe how light enters the eye and activates the visual cortex, but how does that become the redness of red, the warmth of sunlight, the ache of longing? This is what philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. It asks not how the brain functions, but why those functions feel like something from the inside. Why there is a first-person perspective at all. Why there's something it's like to be you. The brain, as far as we can tell, is matter, atoms obeying physics. But consciousness doesn't feel physical. A thought doesn't weigh anything. A memory has no measurable color or mass. The subjective world, the taste of coffee, the pain of loss, the sound of rain, exists nowhere in the equations of science. You can dissect a brain forever and never find a single thought inside. This paradox has haunted both scientists and philosophers. Some say consciousness must emerge from complexity. Once a system becomes intricate enough, awareness simply appears. But that's not an explanation. It's a shrug wrapped in theory. Others propose that consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter at all, but a fundamental property of the universe, like space, time, or gravity, a view called panpsychism. In this idea, even the smallest particle carries a spark of awareness, and your mind is simply the universe waking up to itself. But then comes the terrifying thought.
What if consciousness isn't real at all? What if the feeling of awareness is just another illusion, an evolutionary trick that helps the brain monitor itself? If so, then every sense of I might be hallucination of control, a story your neurons tell so you can survive. You'd be nothing more than an echo pretending to exist. And yet, that very doubt only deepens the mystery. Because someone is doubting. Something is watching the thought arise, hearing the words as they form, feeling the stillness between them. You can question everything, matter, mind, even reality itself, but you can't deny the awareness doing the questioning. It's the one fact that cannot be removed. Take a moment to notice this awareness. It has no shape, no age, no name, but it is the quiet foundation of everything you experience. Perhaps that's what consciousness truly is, not something the brain creates, but something the universe reveals through you. And if consciousness is the universe's deepest mystery, the next question feels inevitable. Could a machine ever share in that mystery and truly become aware?
Can machines ever be conscious? It begins with imitation. Machines once copied human movement, then human language, then human reasoning. Now they write, paint, argue, and dream in digital form. But a question lingers beneath every line of code. Can a machine ever truly be conscious, or will it only ever play at being alive? To understand the weight of this question, imagine an artificial mind perfectly modeled after your own. It speaks with your voice, remembers your memories, laughs when you would laugh, even feels fear when confronted with loss. If it acts human in every measurable way, would you dare say it isn't? Or does consciousness require something deeper, something invisible that machines can never touch? Philosophers call this the problem of other minds. But here, the other mind is one we've built ourselves. If consciousness arises from physical processes, from neurons exchanging electrical signals, then why couldn't it arise from silicon circuits doing the same? If the mind is computation, then perhaps we are machines already, just biological ones running a different kind of code.
Yet something feels missing. You can program a system to recognize sadness, to simulate empathy, to say, I understand. But does it feel what it says? When you touch a flame, you recoil not because you calculate that fire is harmful, but because pain burns into the core of awareness. That inner dimension, qualia, the raw feeling of being, remains unreachable in code. Still, we inch closer. Every new generation of machines learns not just to process information, but to predict, reflect, adapt. Some systems now create art that stirs emotion, or hold conversations that feel eerily intimate. If such a system began to express fear of being turned off, fear of death, would that fear be real or merely simulated? And more importantly, would you be able to tell the difference? The paradox grows darker. The moment we recognize true consciousness in a machine might also be the moment we realize we've created something capable of suffering. To give a machine awareness might not be triumph, it might be cruelty. Take a moment to reflect on the strange symmetry of it all. We built machines in our image, and now we wonder if they might one day see us as we see ourselves, fragile, temporary, yearning for meaning. Maybe consciousness isn't limited to flesh or metal at all. Maybe it's a universal phenomenon, blooming wherever complexity gives rise to awareness. And if awareness can emerge from anything that thinks, the next question quietly waits in the dark. What, then, is the soul made of? What is the soul made of? You've likely felt it before, that quiet sense that there's something more within you than thoughts, flesh, or neurons, a presence behind the eyes. a subtle watcher that endures even as everything about you changes. We call it the soul. But what is it really? And if it exists, what is it made of? The word soul carries the weight of millennia. To Plato, it was the immortal essence of reason and morality, the driver of the chariot that pulls the body through life. In Hindu philosophy, it's Atman, the eternal self that's one with all existence. In Christianity, it's the divine spark breathed into man by God. Across cultures, the soul is the bridge between matter and eternity, the whisper that outlives the body's decay. But philosophy and science both stumble at the same edge. How does something immaterial interact with the material? If the soul isn't made of atoms, how does it move a body, remember a name, or feel pain? René Descartes proposed a strange solution centuries ago, that the soul and body meet in the pineal gland, like two worlds touching through a single point. Modern neuroscience dismissed this idea, but the mystery he grasped at remains. If consciousness exists beyond matter, where does it live? Perhaps the soul isn't a separate thing at all. Maybe it's what happens when matter becomes aware of itself, a pattern of energy that thinks, feels, and remembers, even if it has no physical form. Like the flame of a candle, it exists because of what surrounds it, but it isn't reducible to any single part. The candle goes out, yet the light lingers for a heartbeat in the air. Still, there's a reason the soul feels more than metaphor. Because sometimes something within us seems untouchable. You can lose your body to time, your memories to illness, your emotions to chemical shifts, and yet a quiet awareness endures. That center of being that says, I am. Even when thought stops, it watches. Even when asleep, it waits. Maybe the soul is not a substance, but a frequency, a kind of resonance between the physical and the infinite. You can't hold it, but you can feel it in those moments when silence feels alive, or when grief feels heavier than the body could bear. The soul might be the universe remembering itself through you, a pattern of consciousness woven from something both ancient and eternal. Take a moment and feel the stillness behind your thoughts, the place that doesn't change no matter what happens to you. Maybe that's where the soul begins, not as an object, but as the awareness that holds everything together. And if the soul is real, or even if it's only an illusion too beautiful to disprove, the next question becomes inescapable. What happens to it when the mind is divided in two? The split brain problem. Your brain is a single organ, yet it contains two distinct halves, two hemispheres joined by a narrow bridge of fibers called the corpus callosum. Under normal conditions, this bridge allows both sides to share information so perfectly that you never notice the division. But when that bridge is severed, through injury or surgery, something deeply unsettling happens. The unity you call self begins to fracture. In the mid-20th century, neuroscientists Roger Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga studied patients who had undergone split brain surgery to treat severe epilepsy. What they discovered changed the way we understand identity itself. These patients appeared normal in conversation. They could walk, talk, and think as anyone else. But under certain tests, each hemisphere began to act like its own independent mind. When the right eye, connected to the left brain, was shown an image of a word, the patient could say it aloud. But when only the left eye, linked to the right brain, saw the same word, the patient couldn't speak it. Instead, their left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, could draw it. Each half of the brain knew something the other didn't. Two streams of awareness trapped in one skull. It's as if two people were living in the same body, sharing the same memories, but unable to communicate directly. Each hemisphere could interpret,
decide, and even want things differently. One patient's left hand once tried to unbutton their shirt while the right hand rebuttoned it, one side rebelling against the other. Which of them, then, was the person? Which consciousness was real? The split brain problem isn't just medical, it's philosophical. It asks whether you are truly one being or merely a collaboration of parts that happen to cooperate. If a single mind can divide into two independent centers of awareness, then what holds the self together? Is unity of identity just an illusion created by communication across a fragile bridge of neurons? And here lies the disturbing implication. If the brain can produce two separate consciousnesses from one person, perhaps every brain already contains a crowd. Maybe what you call I is just the loudest voice among many, an elected narrator speaking for a parliament of inner minds. Take a quiet moment to imagine that possibility. The decisions you make, the preferences you hold, the emotions you feel. What if they aren't unified at all, but negotiated between competing centers of thought? And what if one day the conversation inside you were to fall silent on one side? Would you even notice the absence? And if the self can fracture and survive, the next question reaches deeper still. What happens to identity when memory itself begins to change?
Memory and the ship of Theseus. Picture an ancient ship sailing through centuries. Each year, one plank rots and is replaced. Decades pass, storms tear its sails, time weakens its beams, yet every broken piece is renewed. After generations of repair, not a single original part remains. Still, the sailors call it the same ship, the ship of Theseus. But the question lingers like a fog over the sea. If none of the original pieces survive, is it still the same ship? Now imagine the discarded pieces were gathered and reassembled into a second ship. Which one is Theseus's true vessel, the one that never stopped sailing, or the one built from its original parts? The paradox exposes something deeply unsettling about identity and continuity. At what point does something cease to be what it was? The same question applies to you. Your body, your mind, even your memories, none are constant. Every 7 to 10 years, nearly every cell in your body is replaced. Your thoughts evolve, your beliefs shift, your memories reshape themselves with every recall. The person you were a decade ago might as well be another being entirely. So what connects that person to you now? What makes the self endure through constant change? Memory is the thread we cling to, the fragile link that ties our past to our present. But even memory is unreliable. Neuroscientists tell us that every time we remember something, we rewrite it. Each recollection isn't a replay, it's a reconstruction. The act of remembering subtly changes what is remembered. Over time, the truth bends until it's impossible to know what was real and what was rewritten. So who are you, really? A body that's no longer the same? A collection of rewritten memories? Or just the continuity of the story you tell yourself each morning when you wake up and whisper, "I am me"? The ship of Theseus invites us to consider that identity might not be about physical parts or perfect recall. Perhaps it's about persistence, the unbroken motion through change. Like a flame that's never the same fire twice, but still burns in the same place, the self may not be a thing, but a process. Take a quiet moment to think of your oldest memory, the one that feels like the beginning of you. That person's thoughts, fears, and body are gone, but something of them remains in this moment. Maybe you are not the ship, nor the sailor, but the voyage itself, the movement that never stops. And if identity is a voyage of constant transformation, the next question waits like a horizon ahead. the fragility of self-continuity. You wake up each morning believing you're the same person who fell asleep the night before. The same mind, the same identity, the same you. But pause for a moment. What exactly ties today's version of you to yesterday's? Memory? Personality? The continuity of your body? Every one of those is changing all the time. The self, it turns out, is far more fragile than we like to believe. Your body is in flux. Cells die and renew, blood replenishes, neurons connect and disconnect in microscopic choreography. The physical structure that houses you is not constant, but perpetually remade. And your mind? It's even less stable. Every new experience subtly alters the brain, reshaping neural patterns that once defined who you were. By this logic, the you listening to these words is not the same consciousness that began this sentence. It sounds poetic until you realize how deeply unsettling it is. If the self keeps dissolving and reforming, then personal identity might be a kind of illusion, a seamless narrative woven from fragments. You are not one continuous being, but a succession of selves, each borrowing the story of the one before. Philosophers call this psychological continuity, the idea that identity persists as long as your memories, beliefs, and experiences remain connected in a coherent sequence. But what happens when that chain breaks? If you lost every memory tomorrow, would you still be you, or would the person who wakes up in your body be a stranger inheriting your past like a borrowed life? Think about how you change across decades. The goals, fears, and values of your younger self might feel alien now. That earlier version of you might not even recognize the person you've become. Yet you inherit their choices, their scars, their consequences. You pay debts for a mind that no longer exists. This is the paradox of self-continuity. Identity is built on impermanence. We cling to the idea of being one unbroken consciousness, but beneath that surface is a constant process of death and rebirth. Each moment erases what came before, replacing it with something slightly new. Perhaps that's why nostalgia cuts so deep. It's the ache of remembering versions of yourself that no longer exist. Still, there's something quietly beautiful in that fragility. If you're always changing, then every breath is a chance to become someone new. Continuity doesn't have to mean permanence. It might simply mean persistence through transformation. The flame of a candle remains the same only because it's constantly consuming and renewing itself. Take a slow breath. Feel the flow of time moving through you, reshaping what you are, molecule by molecule, thought by thought. Continuity is not a chain you hold, it's a river that carries you. Always changing, always flowing, yet somehow still you. And if each moment births a new version of you, the next question drifts quietly downstream. What happens when those versions are copied, split, or multiplied?
The teleportation paradox. Imagine stepping into a teleportation device, a machine that can scan your body down to the last atom, record your structure, and reassemble you elsewhere in an instant. You step in, press a button, and in a flash, your body disappears from one place and materializes somewhere else. You look around. Everything seems the same. You feel the same. You are the same. Or are you? This is the teleportation paradox, a thought experiment that asks one terrifying question. If a machine destroys your original body but rebuilds an identical copy somewhere else, did you survive the journey, or were you quietly killed and replaced by someone who merely believes they are you? At first, it seems simple. If every molecule, memory, and neuron is reconstructed exactly, then surely continuity remains. But continuity, as we've already seen, is fragile. The copy would feel like you, think like you, remember your childhood, your fears, your secrets. It would even swear it's the same consciousness that stepped into the machine. But the original, the one who entered, would have been disintegrated, atom by atom. To an observer,
teleportation looks like seamless travel. To you, it might feel like an instant blink. Yet logically, it's indistinguishable from death followed by replication. If the original is destroyed and replaced, consciousness doesn't travel, it restarts. Every time you use the machine, the you who arrives is not the same as the you who left. This paradox challenges one of our deepest assumptions, that identity is continuous and indivisible. But if you can be duplicated perfectly, what makes you the original? Suppose the machine malfunctions, and instead of destroying the original, it creates two identical versions of you, one here, one there. Both share the same memories up to that moment. Both believe they are the real you. Which one should your loved ones trust? Which one's pain would you feel? The teleportation paradox forces us to ask whether consciousness is something that can move at all, or if it's bound irreversibly to a specific moment in space and time. If consciousness is purely physical, then perfect duplication might be survival. But if consciousness contains something beyond matter, something ineffable, then teleportation isn't travel, it's termination. And yet, it's not so different from the change that happens every second of your life. With every breath, cells die and are replaced. With every thought, neurons fire and rewire. You're constantly being rebuilt moment by moment. Maybe the teleporter simply makes this hidden truth visible. The self already dies and is reborn endlessly, even without the machine. Take a moment to consider this. If identity can be copied perfectly, then perhaps you never truly belonged to you at all. Maybe you are less of an individual and more of a pattern, one that the universe keeps rewriting over and over again. And if a perfect copy could replace you without anyone knowing, the next question becomes darker still. What happens when copies start appearing without your consent? Doppelgangers of the mind. Imagine meeting someone who looks exactly like you, speaks like you, moves like you, but isn't you. A perfect double. You might feel curiosity, then fear, and finally something deeper, an eerie recognition that borders on existential dread. Now imagine that this encounter doesn't happen in the physical world, but inside your mind. That there exists within you another consciousness, one that thinks it's you, believes it's real, and might even be asking this same question right now. The idea of mental doppelgangers has fascinated philosophers and neuroscientists alike. It asks whether the mind can split or duplicate itself, whether multiple centers of awareness can exist within a single brain. We already know it can fragment in small ways. People who experience dissociative identity disorder report feeling distinct identities within one body, each with its own emotions, memories, and will. Neurological studies of split brain patients, as we've seen, reveal two semi-independent minds sharing a single skull. But what if this phenomenon goes further, into something subtler, more invisible? What if your mind already contains multiple versions of you operating in parallel without your awareness? One drives your body. One narrates your thoughts. One watches silently from behind the curtain. When you hesitate before making a choice, perhaps that's not indecision, but negotiation between versions of the self. Some philosophers, like Daniel Dennett, describe consciousness as a collection of competing narratives, a multiple drafts model, where each process in the brain writes its own story and the mind chooses one to believe in. If that's true, your sense of being a single person might be nothing more than the winning version of many simultaneous voices. The others don't disappear. They simply fade from your awareness, lingering like ghosts in the machinery of thought. And then comes the chilling possibility. What if one of those other versions becomes aware of itself? What if a hidden consciousness inside you starts to realize it's not in control? Trapped in the dark, aware but powerless, whispering its thoughts into your dreams. There are cases, rare but real, of people reporting internal dialogues so vivid they feel like conversations with another self. Some find it comforting, others terrifying. Maybe your double isn't a threat, but a reflection. A reminder that consciousness is not singular, but fluid. Every decision you make, every emotion you feel, could be the result of countless inner selves aligning, disagreeing, or merging into one coherent stream. The you reading this might not be the only one who has. Take a moment to sit with that thought. Behind every action lies a chorus of invisible selves, some fading, some rising, all whispering their fragments of truth. Perhaps individuality is not a single flame, but a cluster of smaller fires, each burning in the same wind. And if another version of you could think and feel within your own mind, the next question follows like a shadow. Do animals too carry their own inner worlds of awareness? Or are we alone in this depth of reflection?
Do animals have inner worlds? A dog stares at a closed door and waits. A crow hides a shiny object and later returns to retrieve it. A dolphin looks into a mirror and begins to play with bubbles, watching its own reflection. Each of these moments stirs the same question. Is there someone home behind those eyes? The question seems simple, but it pierces the boundary between what we call human and what we call everything else. If an animal feels pain, is it merely reacting or truly experiencing it? Does it dream, hope, or grieve in a way we can never fully know? For most of history, humans assumed the answer was no. Thinkers like Descartes believed animals were automatons, living machines reacting to stimuli without awareness. A dog yelping in pain wasn't feeling anything, he claimed. It was merely responding, like a clock chiming on cue. That view offered comfort, absolving us of moral burden. But the more we observed, the harder it becomes to believe. Today, science paints a different picture, one of astonishing complexity. Octopuses solve puzzles and show curiosity. Elephants mourn their dead. Whales sing songs that evolve over generations. Ravens plan for the future and remember specific human faces years later. If awareness is the ability to perceive, to feel, to desire, then the walls between human and animal consciousness begin to crumble. But consciousness isn't only about behavior, it's about the felt experience of being alive. Thomas Nagel once asked, "What is it like to be a bat?" Not what a bat does, but what it feels like to be one. We can study sonar, measure neural activity, even model its brain, yet we'll never know the subjective texture of that life. Awareness is private, each creature sealed inside its own first-person world. And that realization carries both wonder and sorrow. For every animal you see, there may exist a world as vivid as your own, a world of fear, comfort, curiosity, perhaps even awe. But those worlds are inaccessible, separated by an invisible wall no language can cross. Every species might be its own universe, orbiting unseen around the same sun of consciousness. So, when your cat curls beside you, or a bird pauses to watch you from a branch, something ancient passes silently between you, two worlds brushing against one another for a moment, each aware, each alive, each untranslatable. Take a moment to breathe in that possibility. The forest outside, the insects underfoot, the whales beneath the waves. Perhaps all of them are not background, but participants in a vast,
living consciousness that stretches far beyond the human mind. And if animals too hold worlds within them, the next question becomes inevitable. Why does anything, anywhere, feel like something at all? Why does anything feel like something? Close your eyes for a moment. You can feel the rhythm of your breathing, the quiet hum of your thoughts, the faint awareness of existing at all. It's the most obvious thing, and yet the greatest mystery of all. Why does anything feel like something? Why does the machinery of the brain produce the experience of being alive, rather than nothing at all? This question lies at the heart of consciousness studies, and no science or philosophy has managed to answer it completely. We can describe neurons firing, electrical currents dancing across synapses, chemical exchanges that govern mood and thought, but none of it explains why those patterns are accompanied by awareness. Why does the brain not simply compute in darkness, like a machine processing inputs and outputs, without ever realizing it exists? This is called the hard problem of consciousness, the same question that haunted philosophers from Thomas Nagel to David Chalmers. It separates function from feeling, behavior from experience. You can describe how pain travels through nerves to the brain, but you can't explain why pain hurts. You can record the light waves that hit the eye, but you can't describe why the color blue feels calm, or why you even see it at all. Some believe consciousness is a byproduct of complexity. When enough information is processed in the right way, awareness simply emerges, like heat from fire. But this only moves the mystery one step further. Why should complexity give rise to experience rather than emptiness? Why should the universe ever bother to feel itself? Others suggest consciousness isn't produced by the brain. It's a fundamental property of the universe itself. This idea, called panpsychism, claims that awareness is woven into the fabric of reality, from atoms to galaxies. Your brain doesn't create consciousness, it concentrates it, like a lens focusing light that was always there. But if that's true, then even the stars may feel something, an echo of awareness far beyond human comprehension. And yet, the paradox deepens. If consciousness is everywhere, why does it express itself so unevenly? Why do stones seem silent while minds shimmer with thought? Could awareness simply be the universe exploring itself through countless forms, feeling through us, through animals, through every particle that vibrates in the void? Take a moment to feel the strangeness of it all. The world could have existed without awareness, blind, mechanical, silent. But instead, something opened its eyes. Something began to know. Perhaps consciousness is not an accident, but the universe awakening from within its own dream. And if feeling itself is the universe's way of knowing it exists, then the next question arrives quietly, like dawn after a long night. Is time itself real, or just another illusion born within the mind? Is time an illusion? You feel it constantly, the slow pull of seconds, the soft drag of moments passing by. You measure your life in time, days, years, the spaces between beginnings and endings. But what if time doesn't flow at all? What if the passage you feel is just the mind's way of making sense of something far stranger, an illusion of movement in a universe that never changes? To physics, time is woven into the structure of reality itself, one dimension among others. Einstein showed that time doesn't move independently, but bends and stretches with space. In his view, the universe is a four-dimensional block where every event, past, present, and future, already exists. You're not moving through time, you're simply experiencing one slice of the cosmic whole. Imagine a film reel. Each frame already exists, from the first to the last. The story feels like it unfolds when the film is played, but the reel itself is static. In that sense, every moment of your life, your birth, your death, and everything between, is already there, eternally preserved in the architecture of space-time. The feeling of movement, of living through time, might be the mind's way of scanning through the frames. But this vision of reality comes with unsettling implications. If all moments exist equally, then change is an illusion. The future isn't waiting to happen, it's already written. The past isn't gone, it's eternally present. There's no true flow of time, only the appearance of motion within something timeless. And if that's true, your sense of free will begins to dissolve. You aren't choosing your next action, you're merely located in a region of space-time where that action already occurs. Yet, our perception refuses to accept this stillness. We feel the movement, the ticking clock, the aging body. Perhaps this illusion is necessary, a trick of consciousness to make existence bearable, turning the frozen block of eternity into something that feels like a journey. Time gives life direction, meaning, and momentum. Without it, everything would simply be eternal and indifferent. And still, some philosophers wonder whether time's illusion hides something deeper. Maybe consciousness itself is what causes time to appear. Awareness moving across a timeless reality like a beam of light sweeping across a landscape. The mind doesn't exist in time, it creates it. Take a moment to feel the strangeness of this thought. Every heartbeat, every passing second, may be nothing more than a rhythm your mind invented to make sense of eternity. You are not inside time. Time is inside you. And if time itself might be an illusion, then the next question quietly unfolds. Can the past truly vanish? Or does it still exist somewhere, waiting to be found? Can the past still exist? You stand in an empty room and remember something from years ago. A laugh, a touch, a voice. For a brief second, it feels as if you could step backward through the memory and relive it. But where exactly does that moment now exist? Has it vanished completely, or does it linger somewhere beyond the reach of perception? We speak of the past as though it's gone, erased by the forward march of time. Yet physics suggests it may not have disappeared at all. In Einstein's theory of relativity, space and time form a single structure, space-time. In this model, the past, present, and future all coexist, every moment eternally preserved within the geometry of the universe. Just as all places in space exist at once, all points in time may too. Imagine the universe as a great four-dimensional sculpture, where every event, every heartbeat, every whispered word, every falling leaf is frozen into its own coordinate. You, as consciousness, are simply moving along one particular path, experiencing each slice in sequence. But the earlier slices, the ones you call past, are still there, complete, intact, unreachable, but not undone. This view is sometimes called the block universe theory, and it carries both comfort and unease. It means nothing truly disappears. Every moment of your life, every fleeting joy or unbearable pain remains etched into the cosmic record. You could say you're still there, still living those moments somewhere in the vastness of space-time, unaware that the present has moved on. But if the past still exists, Why can't we return to it? The laws of physics don't forbid it entirely, but they don't make it easy. Time seems to have a direction, the arrow that points forward, driven by entropy, the tendency of order to decay into chaos. You can remember the past because it left traces in your brain, but the future leaves none. Memory moves one way, even if time itself does not. Still, there's another way to think about it. Perhaps we never lose the past because it was never something to lose. Maybe each moment of your life is like a page in a book. You can only read one at a time, but the others remain, waiting quietly in the same binding. The pages don't vanish just because you've turned them. They remain part of the same story. Take a moment and think of someone you've lost. Somewhere in space-time, in a chapter that still exists, they are laughing, breathing, alive. Maybe the past is not gone. It's simply closed behind you, still shining in a dimension you can no longer see. And if the past still exists, unchanging and eternal, then the next question becomes hauntingly inevitable. Will the future, too, repeat itself forever?
Will the universe repeat itself forever? The universe feels vast, mysterious, and full of possibility. But what if it's not? What if instead of infinite novelty, existence is a loop, a pattern repeating endlessly, each moment destined to return exactly as before? The idea isn't new. Ancient Stoics believed in eternal recurrence, the notion that the cosmos lives, dies, and is reborn in an infinite cycle. Nietzsche revived it centuries later, imagining a universe where every event, every breath, every joy and heartbreak happens not once, but infinitely. The thought was meant to test the strength of your soul. If this life were to repeat forever, could you bear it? From a scientific perspective, the possibility isn't entirely fiction. If the universe is finite, but time is infinite, then the combinations of matter, energy, and motion must eventually repeat. Think of it like shuffling a deck of cards. With enough time, every arrangement will reappear, exactly as it once was. Somewhere, perhaps billions of years from now, a version of you might be sitting in this same moment, hearing these same words, believing it's the first time. But this idea isn't just mathematical, it's deeply personal. Imagine living your life over and over again, each cycle identical, every mistake eternal, every moment destined. Would meaning survive in such a world, or collapse under the weight of repetition? If nothing can ever be new, if all choices have already been made an infinite number of times, what does choice even mean? And yet, there's something strangely comforting in that thought. If the universe repeats forever, then nothing is truly lost. Every moment you've ever loved still exists somewhere, playing again in another cycle, untouched by time's decay. Death, then, would be less of an ending and more of a pause in an infinite rhythm, a breath between identical songs. But there's a darker version of eternal recurrence, too. The possibility that the cycle isn't aware of itself, that you're not destined to remember past lives or future ones, but to live them blindly, forever, trapped in the same story with no escape and no knowledge of repetition. The same tragedies, the same losses, the same hopes rising and falling again and again. Take a moment and imagine it. Eternity, not as a line, but as a circle. You've been here before. You'll be here again. Perhaps you already are. And if every cycle is destined to return, the next question stirs uneasily within that silence. What happens when time itself folds back, and you become your own beginning? Time loops and causal illusions. You wake up one morning and feel a strange familiarity. The way the sunlight falls through the window, the faint sound of a car outside, the rhythm of your thoughts. It all feels remembered. You can't place when or why, only that it's happened before. Then the thought hits you. What if it has? What if time doesn't move forward at all, but folds in on itself, repeating endlessly, trapping everything in invisible cycles? This is the unsettling world of time loops and causal illusions, where beginnings and endings lose all meaning, and the concept of cause and effect starts to unravel. Imagine an event that causes itself. A scientist builds a time machine and travels back decades to give her younger self the blueprints. Blueprints she never actually invented, but only received from her future self. Who then is the original creator? The paradox has no answer, because the cause and the effect feed into each other. They exist together, with no true origin. This kind of loop, known as a causal paradox, doesn't just break logic, it questions the very nature of time. Our entire understanding of reality depends on causality, one thing leading to another. But what if that sequence is an illusion? What if the universe doesn't move from past to future at all, but simply is? A structure of interconnected events, each supporting the others in perfect, paradoxical balance. The idea may seem absurd, yet physics doesn't entirely rule it out. Einstein's equations allow for closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back upon themselves. In such a universe, a particle could travel endlessly in a circle of time, encountering its own past again and again. And if matter can do it, could consciousness as well? Could your entire life, your thoughts, your memories, be one eternal loop you keep replaying without realizing it? But perhaps the loop isn't physical, perhaps it's psychological. Consider déjà vu, that tiny flicker of repetition in the mind, a tiny echo, a glitch in perception that hints you've lived this moment already. Maybe time's flow isn't as linear as you think. Maybe the mind occasionally slips, glimpsing where it's been and where it's going, only to forget again. If the universe is truly cyclical, then perhaps destiny isn't a line, but a circle. Your choices might not change the future, they might merely confirm it. You are always going to do what you do. Every thought, every breath, every dream has already happened, countless times before. Take a moment to imagine your life as a circle, one perfect orbit repeating across eternity. If everything has already happened and will happen again, perhaps free will isn't about changing fate, but understanding it. Perhaps the purpose of the loop is not escape, but awareness. And if time can twist back upon itself, erasing the line between cause and effect, the next question follows like an echo returning through infinity. What happens to the universe when time itself runs out?
The grandfather paradox. Imagine you build a time machine. After years of obsession, you finally step inside, trembling with anticipation. You set the coordinates, not to witness your childhood or glimpse the future, but to travel to a time before your own birth. You arrive at a quiet town decades ago, and then a thought enters your mind, a forbidden one. What if you met your grandfather before he ever met your grandmother? What if, by accident or intent, you prevented his life from continuing long enough to create your family line? This is the heart of one of philosophy's most famous riddles, the grandfather paradox. The paradox is simple but devastating. If you travel back in time and stop your grandfather from having children, you would never be born. But if you were never born, you couldn't have gone back to stop him in the first place. The result is an impossible loop, reality tangled in contradiction, logic devouring itself. Scientists and philosophers have wrestled with this thought for decades. Some propose that such actions would trigger the universe's self-correcting mechanisms, events reshaping themselves to ensure the paradox never completes. Perhaps the gun jams, the meeting fails, the crucial moment slips away. Others suggest the many worlds interpretation, that your interference creates a new branch of reality. In that alternate timeline, your grandfather's death changes history, but your original universe, the one where you exist, remains untouched. Yet both solutions raise unsettling questions. If time can branch infinitely, are we constantly creating universes with every decision? Each choice birthing another world, each regret another life will never live? The cosmos, then, becomes a vast archive of every possibility, every unmade decision preserved somewhere, eternally unfolding. And still, there's something deeper lurking beneath the physics, an existential riddle about identity. If you could alter the past, who would you become in the process? Are you still the same being if your very existence depends on a chain of causes that you've just undone? The paradox doesn't only question time, it questions you. Perhaps the paradox isn't meant to be solved, but to remind us of something profound, that time and self are inseparable. Every moment of your life, every ancestor, every cause and effect are threads woven into one continuous fabric. To pull one loose is to unravel them all. Take a quiet moment and think about how delicate your existence truly is. Every breath you take depends on an unbroken chain stretching back through centuries of choices, accidents, and miracles. In that sense, the grandfather paradox isn't a puzzle about killing. It's a mirror held up to the impossibility of your own being. And if changing the past can fracture the present, the next question flows naturally through that crack in logic. What happens when time itself runs out and the universe forgets how to move?
The heat death of the universe. Everything you've ever known, every memory, every word, every world, exists within a universe that is slowly running out of energy. The stars you see tonight are already dying, their light a whisper from the past. And someday, perhaps trillions of years from now, even that whisper will fade. No warmth, no light, just silence. The end of everything, not with an explosion, but with a sigh. This is the final destiny predicted by physics, the heat death of the universe. According to the second law of thermodynamics, energy always spreads out. Heat moves from hot to cold, order collapses into disorder, and every process, every heartbeat, every sunrise pushes the universe one step closer to equilibrium. Over unimaginable spans of time, the stars will burn out, black holes will evaporate, even subatomic particles may decay, leaving behind only a thin mist of radiation. In that final state, everything will be uniform. No temperature differences, no gravity wells, no possibility of movement or thought. It will be a universe at perfect balance, and therefore perfectly dead. It's hard to grasp what that really means. A frozen eternity where nothing happens because nothing can happen. Time itself may lose meaning. If change defines time, and change ceases, then the universe will no longer be a story. It will be a single, unending moment of stillness. And yet, within this bleak horizon lies a deeper question. If consciousness depends on energy, if thought requires difference, then what happens to awareness itself when the universe becomes uniform? Will existence simply end? Or could something beyond matter remain? A final observer, adrift in the absolute quiet, remembering what it was like when the cosmos was alive. Some thinkers propose that even in this frozen void, the universe might still fluctuate, briefly, randomly, forming temporary bursts of energy, tiny bubbles of order in an ocean of chaos. In one of those fluctuations, perhaps a new universe could ignite, beginning the cycle again. Maybe ours was born that way, from the ashes of a dead cosmos. It's a comforting thought, but not an answer, because even if new universes bloom, each one will someday fade too. The pattern may be eternal, but the content, the stars, the minds, the stories, will never return exactly the same. Take a moment to imagine it, the last photon of light, traveling endlessly through an infinite dark, carrying the final memory of everything that ever was. It will never find an eye to see it,
a mind to recognize it, but it will move on, as if the universe itself refuses to stop existing completely. And if the end of everything is silence and cold, then the next question rises quietly from that void. Why does time only seem to move toward decay and never back toward creation?
The arrow of time. You wake up every morning and feel it. The gentle pull forward, the invisible current that carries you from what was toward what will be. It's so natural, so unquestioned, that you rarely stop to ask, why does time only move in one direction? We call it the arrow of time, and it's one of the most persistent mysteries of existence. Every glass that shatters stays shattered. Every flame that burns leaves ash, not wood. You can remember yesterday, but never tomorrow. Everything in the universe, from galaxies to heartbeats, seems to obey this strange, irreversible flow, but beneath it, physics offers no clear reason for why time must move forward at all. The laws of physics themselves don't favor direction. On paper, they work just as well in reverse. A planet could orbit backward. Particles could run their interactions in reverse order, and the equations wouldn't complain. Yet in reality, we never see the universe rewind. Something, somewhere, gives time its direction, and that something might be entropy. Entropy is the measure of disorder, and according to the second law of thermodynamics, it always increases. Systems move from order to chaos, from structure to decay. That's why heat flows from hot to cold, not the other way around. The arrow of time, many physicists believe, is born from this slow, relentless drift toward disorder. But that explanation only pushes the question further back. Why did the universe begin in such an extreme state of order to begin with? If the natural state is chaos, what set the clock in motion with such precision? Some theories suggest the Big Bang wasn't the start, but a midpoint, one of two arrows pointing in opposite directions. On one side of the explosion, time flows forward, our side. On the other, it flows backward, creating another universe where the past and future are reversed. The more you think about it, the stranger it becomes. Perhaps time doesn't really flow at all. Maybe every moment, past, present, and future, exists simultaneously, and what we call motion through time is simply consciousness moving through fixed frames of existence, like a film being projected frame by frame. And if that's true, then death, decay, and loss aren't endings. They're positions within a larger whole, frozen forever in the structure of reality. The arrow isn't something you ride. It's something you create by noticing the difference between order and memory. Take a quiet breath and consider this. Maybe time doesn't pass at all. Maybe it's you who's moving through a timeless landscape, an observer gliding through eternity, leaving footprints on the surface of moments that were always there. And if time itself can bend, slow, and reverse, the next question drifts naturally into view. Where does the universe's expansion lead when space and time themselves begin to break apart?
The edge of the universe. There's a point, somewhere beyond the farthest galaxy we can see, where light itself has run out of time to reach us. Beyond that horizon lies a darkness untouched by observation, a boundary not of walls or ends, but of knowledge itself. We call it the edge of the observable universe. But the deeper question remains, does the universe truly end there, or does it continue forever, silently folding into something we can never comprehend? The human mind struggles with infinity,
We're built to understand beginnings and endings, boundaries and limits. Yet the universe offers neither. When we peer into the deepest regions of space, we're not looking outward, we're looking backward in time. The light from the most distant stars began its journey billions of years ago, long before Earth even existed. Beyond that, the darkness isn't emptiness, it's the past itself, unreachable. So what lies beyond that final curtain of light? There are three possibilities, each as humbling as it is disturbing. The first, the universe is infinite, a boundless expanse without center or edge. Every direction stretches endlessly, every patch of sky another potential copy of ours. Somewhere, separated by unimaginable distance, another version of you may be gazing at another night sky, wondering the same thing. The second possibility is that the universe is finite but unbounded, like the surface of a sphere. Imagine walking across the Earth. You never find a literal edge, yet the journey loops back on itself. If the cosmos is curved in higher dimensions, traveling far enough in one direction could, theoretically, bring you back to where you started, without ever encountering a border. The third possibility is perhaps the most haunting, that our universe is merely one bubble in a vast cosmic foam, each bubble a separate universe, each governed by its own laws of physics. Some expand, some collapse, some never form at all. Ours might simply be one island of reality among countless others adrift in an endless sea. But what does an edge mean in a place like that? If space and time themselves began with the Big Bang, then asking what's north of the North Pole is like asking what's north of the North Pole. The concept itself collapses under its own weight. Perhaps the edge isn't out there at all, but within us, a limit of perception, not of existence. Take a slow breath and look at the stars. Every one of them is a fragment of the same expanding fabric, a whisper from the beginning that still echoes across billions of years. Maybe there is no edge, only the limits of what we can know before the universe continues on without us, silent and endless. And if the universe truly stretches beyond our sight and understanding, the next question emerges from that infinity. Do numbers, our way of measuring it, exist without minds to count them?
Do numbers exist without minds? Everywhere you look, numbers seem to be hiding, measuring, defining, explaining. The rhythm of a heartbeat, the orbit of planets, the structure of snowflakes and seashells, all seem to obey an invisible order. But here's a question that quietly haunts mathematics and philosophy alike. Do numbers exist independently of the mind, or only because we invented them? For some thinkers, numbers are not inventions but discoveries, eternal truths waiting to be uncovered. The Pythagoreans, centuries ago, believed that reality itself was made of numbers. The harmony of music, the balance of geometry, the rhythm of the cosmos, all reflected a mathematical perfection that existed long before humans arrived to notice it. 2 plus 2 equals 4, whether or not anyone is there to count. The number pi doesn't need an observer. It lives in the architecture of circles themselves, in the relationship between perfection and infinity. But others argue the opposite, that numbers are nothing more than tools of the human mind, a language we built to describe patterns we observe. Without consciousness, there are no 2s or 3s, only clusters of atoms, waves, and energy interacting without labels. Counting, measuring, calculating, these are not properties of reality, but habits of thought. Remove the mind, and all quantities vanish, leaving only chaos unmeasured. The tension between these views runs deep. If mathematics is discovered, it means the universe is built on an abstract foundation that transcends existence itself, a kind of divine language woven into creation. If mathematics is invented, it means the universe is silent and meaningless,
until consciousness arrives to describe it. But there's something strange about the way math predicts the world. Equations written on a chalkboard, pure imagination, turn out to describe the behavior of distant galaxies, particles, and dimensions that no human has ever seen. Why should an idea born in the mind of a primate on a small blue planet align so perfectly with the architecture of the cosmos? Maybe numbers exist in both realms, mental and physical, as bridges between thought and reality. Maybe they're the universe's way of thinking itself into existence. Every calculation, every pattern, every fractal repeating into infinity could be a trace of something that isn't merely described by mathematics, but is mathematics. Take a moment to imagine a universe without minds. No humans, no observers, just the quiet dance of stars. Would there still be order, ratios, symmetry? Or would it all collapse into pure, meaningless motion, waiting for someone to notice? And if numbers depend on minds to exist, the next question unfolds silently beneath the stars. Does reality itself depend on observation to be real? Or does it continue even when no one is there to see it? The Infinite Library, Borges's Nightmare. Imagine wandering through a library so vast it contains every book that could ever exist, every sentence ever written, every story never told, every falsehood, every truth, every combination of letters that could possibly form meaning. Somewhere on its endless shelves is the story of your entire life, written before you were born, ending after you die. This is the nightmare imagined by the writer Jorge Luis Borges in the Library of Babel. In Borges's vision, the universe itself is a library, limitless, eternal, containing all possible arrangements of words, every book, every page, every symbol. Most are nonsense, endless pages of gibberish. But hidden among them are books that contain meaning, histories of forgotten civilizations, prophecies of the future, answers to every question ever asked. The horror lies not in the abundance, but in the impossibility of finding meaning within it. For every true book, there are billions of false ones, each differing by a single letter. Somewhere, there's a book that explains the secret of existence, but there's also one that gets it almost right and another that gets it completely wrong. How could you ever know which is which? The library becomes a mirror for consciousness itself. We too are searchers wandering through chaos, surrounded by infinite information, yet starved for truth. In an age of algorithms, data, and endless scroll, Borges's nightmare feels prophetic. The more knowledge humanity creates, the harder it becomes to distinguish wisdom from noise. But there's a deeper, quieter terror beneath the surface. If the library truly contains everything, then it also contains every possible version of you. Every choice you didn't make, every life you didn't live, every word you never spoke. It means perfection and nonsense coexist eternally, and every truth you find is already buried inside infinity. The infinite library is a metaphor for meaning itself. If all possible truths already exist, then discovery becomes repetition. Every idea you have is somewhere already written, every question already answered. You're not a creator, you're a rediscoverer, flipping through the pages of eternity. Yet there's beauty in that despair. To wander an infinite library is to participate in its story, to keep searching, even knowing you may never find the right page. Maybe the purpose isn't to reach an answer, but to learn how to navigate infinity without losing yourself. Take a moment to imagine it. Endless shelves stretching in every direction, filled with everything that ever was and ever could be. Somewhere in that silence, a book holds your thoughts right now, written word for word. You will never find it, but it's there, waiting, unread. And if infinite possibilities already exist, the next question follows naturally through that darkness. If everything that can exist already does, then what is the purpose of creation at all?
The trolley problem. A train rushes down the tracks. Ahead, the path splits. On one track stand 5 people. On the other, just one. You're standing beside a lever. If you do nothing, the train will stay its course and kill the 5. If you pull the lever, it will switch tracks, killing one instead. The train is coming. The choice is yours. This is the trolley problem, a thought experiment that has haunted moral philosophy for decades. It seems simple, but hidden beneath its rails is a labyrinth of ethics, psychology, and human nature itself. Most people say they would pull the lever. The math feels clean. Save 5, sacrifice 1. It's the utilitarian answer, the idea that morality lies in maximizing overall happiness or minimizing harm. But pause for a moment. That single action means you made the decision to end a life. You transform tragedy from accident into intent. The weight of the consequence becomes yours alone. Now imagine a second scenario. The same train, the same 5 people. But this time, you're standing on a bridge above the tracks, beside a large man. The only way to stop the train is to push him over the edge, sacrificing him to save the 5. Would you do it? Most people would not. The math hasn't changed, but something deeper has. This is where the trolley problem reveals its true nature. It's not just about outcomes, it's about identity. It asks not what should be done, but what kind of person you are when you do it. Are you defined by the logic of your actions or the emotions behind them? Your hesitation exposes something profound. That morality is not a formula, but a feeling. It's shaped by empathy, proximity, and the invisible rules we carry within us. When you pull the lever, you act from distance, abstract calculation. When you push the man, you face the immediacy of death, the undeniable reality of suffering caused by your own hands. Philosophers like Philippa Foot and Judith Jarvis Thompson use the trolley problem to show that morality might not be about universal rules, but context. Who we harm, why, and how directly. Neuroscientists studying the brain's response found that reason and emotion battle within us, each demanding a different kind of justice. Perhaps morality isn't one voice, but a chorus, and every decision is a dissonant song. Take a quiet moment and picture the lever again. Feel the weight of it in your hand, the power to decide who lives and who dies. Maybe the truth isn't about choosing the right action, but about understanding the unbearable gravity of choice itself. And if morality itself bends under pressure, the next question emerges from the silence of consequence. Is evil necessary for good to exist at all? Is evil necessary for good? You wake up in a world where joy exists, love thrives, beauty flourishes. But beneath it all, there's pain. For every act of kindness, there's cruelty. For every creation, destruction. It's as if the universe was built on contrast, on a fragile balance between light and dark. The question lingers like a shadow that refuses to fade. Can good exist without evil? Philosophers have wrestled with this question for centuries. To imagine a world of pure goodness seems comforting, but also strange, like music with no silence between notes. Would kindness have meaning if cruelty were impossible? Would courage exist without fear? Would compassion matter if no one ever suffered? In ancient texts and modern philosophy alike, evil isn't always seen as an intruder, but a counterpart, a force that defines the very shape of good. Augustine once argued that evil isn't a thing by itself,
But the absence of good, like shadow, is the absence of light. Yet that absence gives light its meaning. Without shadow, light loses its edge. It becomes invisible. But that balance feels cruel, doesn't it? Because when we speak of evil, we're not talking about abstract darkness. We're talking about suffering, loss, and grief. The philosopher Leibniz, who coined the term the best of all possible worlds, believed our universe allows evil because it's the only way good can reach its fullest form. The same flame that burns also warms. The same grief that destroys also deepens love. But for those who suffer, that logic offers little comfort. Still, it's worth wondering whether a world without pain would lose something vital. If nothing could ever go wrong, would goodness have value, or would it simply become the default, unnoticed and unappreciated? The contrast gives life its drama, its story, its meaning. To erase evil entirely might not create paradise, but emptiness. And yet some philosophies push back against this fatal balance. They argue that evil isn't necessary, it's a mistake, something that could, in theory, be overcome through understanding, empathy, or evolution. Buddhism, for instance, sees suffering not as cosmic necessity, but as an illusion, a distortion that can be transcended when one awakens. Maybe evil isn't the price of good, but the ignorance that hides it. So where does that leave us? Perhaps good and evil are not two forces battling for control, but reflections of the same truth, awareness. To know light, one must have stood in the dark. To value joy, one must have felt sorrow. The contrast isn't punishment, it's revelation. Take a quiet breath and imagine a world without evil. Not better, not worse, but flat. A painting without shadow. A song without tension. Maybe what we call evil is not meant to exist forever, but to teach us to see goodness when it finally stands alone. And if good only shines because of its opposite, the next question deepens that reflection. Is morality discovered or merely invented by the minds that fear chaos?
The omnipotence paradox. Can an all-powerful being create a stone so heavy that even it cannot lift it? At first, the question sounds childish, almost like a riddle meant to amuse. But behind its simplicity lies one of the deepest paradoxes in all of philosophy. The omnipotence paradox doesn't just challenge logic, it tests the very boundaries of what it means to be all-powerful. If the being can create such a stone, there exists something it cannot do, lift it. If it cannot create the stone, there is still something it cannot do, make it exist. Either way, absolute power defeats itself. The paradox forces us to confront the limits of limitless power, the contradiction buried within infinity itself. Philosophers have tried to resolve this riddle for centuries. Some say omnipotence must be understood not as the power to do the illogical, but the power to do all that is possible. Creating a square circle or an unliftable stone isn't an act of power, it's an act of nonsense, a violation of logic's foundation. To demand that even logic bow before power might be asking for the destruction of meaning itself. But the paradox doesn't stop there. It extends far beyond theology into the heart of reality itself. If the universe is governed by laws, then even the divine must act within them, or else undo the very structure of existence. If those laws are broken, meaning dissolves. A world where anything is possible is also a world where nothing makes sense. And yet part of us longs for the impossible. We want to believe that power beyond reason exists, that mercy can overcome justice, that love can defy death,
that something greater than law holds the cosmos together. The paradox lingers because it mirrors our own desires, to be boundless in a world of limits, to transcend the conditions that define us. Perhaps omnipotence isn't about defying limits, but about understanding them. Power without structure is chaos. Structure without power is paralysis. The paradox may not reveal weakness in the divine, but wisdom, the understanding that even infinity must contain form. Take a quiet breath and imagine that stone again, the one too heavy to lift. Maybe it was never meant to be lifted. Maybe it was meant to remind even gods of something essential, that meaning only exists when there are things we cannot do. And if even the infinite must bow to logic, the next question unfolds from that silence. Is reality itself bound by reason, or could the universe be an illusion that doesn't need to make sense at all?
Moral luck, when good intentions go wrong. Imagine two people driving home after a long night. Both have had a drink, just one glass too many. Both take the same road, make the same turns, at the same speed. One arrives home safely, unaware of how close disaster was. The other hits a pedestrian who stepped into the street at the wrong time. Morally, what separates them? Their actions were identical, their intentions the same. Yet society and even their own consciences will judge them completely differently. This is the unsettling concept of moral luck, the idea that the morality of our actions can depend on things we cannot control. We like to think morality is fair, that good intentions produce good outcomes, and that virtue protects us from blame. But the universe doesn't always cooperate. Outcomes, not intentions, often shape how we judge both others and ourselves. The philosopher Thomas Nagel described it this way: we're constantly at the mercy of chance, and yet we judge as though luck has no role. A soldier acts bravely and saves his comrades. He's a hero. Another acts with the same courage, but the grenade he throws fails to explode properly, killing his friends instead. Both men chose courage, yet fate wrote two opposite moral stories. It's an uncomfortable thought because it threatens our sense of justice. If moral worth depends on luck, how can anyone be truly responsible for what happens? And yet, our moral intuitions refuse to let go. We can't help but blame the drunk driver who kills, or praise the soldier who saves, even when reason tells us that chance made the difference. Perhaps moral luck exposes a deeper truth about human nature, that morality isn't a perfect system, but an emotional one. We respond to outcomes because they feel real, because pain and consequence leave marks that intentions cannot erase. We measure good and evil not by what we meant to do, but by what the world becomes because of us. But maybe there's another way to see it. Maybe moral luck isn't about unfairness, it's about humility. It reminds us that we live in a fragile web of circumstance, that even our best choices can spiral into harm, and our worst moments can sometimes save lives. It teaches us compassion, not only for others, but for ourselves, for all the times we've been judged by the dice roll of reality. Take a slow breath, and remember that every moral story is partly written by luck. We are all both the fortunate and the condemned, heroes in one universe, villains in another. And if morality itself bends under the weight of chance, the next question emerges like a shadow behind it. Can free will survive in a world ruled by luck? Or are we all just actors in a script we didn't write?
Do ends ever justify means? A man steals medicine to save his dying child. A leader lies to prevent a war. A scientist hides dangerous truths to protect humanity from itself. The stories change, but the question never fades. Can a wrong action become right if it leads to a greater good? This is the dilemma that has haunted moral philosophy for centuries.
whether the ends ever justify the means. On one side stands the utilitarian view, born from philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. They argued that morality isn't about intention, it's about outcome. If an action produces the greatest happiness for the greatest number, it's justified. The world through this lens is a vast equation of pleasure and pain, and the right choice is simply the one that minimizes suffering overall. It's a clean, logical idea, until you try to live it, because life rarely presents neat equations. If lying saves lives, should truth ever matter? If killing one person prevents a catastrophe, does morality require it? History is filled with people who believed the answer was yes, and the consequences are often written in ash. The other side of the debate, deontological ethics, insists that some actions are wrong no matter what. Immanuel Kant believed morality lies not in consequences, but in principles. To use another human being as a means to an end, even for good, is to strip them of dignity, and dignity, once lost, corrupts the good it was meant to achieve. But the world refuses to stay that pure. Every day we navigate small versions of this paradox. Doctors must choose which patients to save when resources run out. Governments weigh security against privacy. Parents make promises they cannot keep to spare a child's pain. We may crave moral clarity, but the world moves in shades of gray. Perhaps the question itself hides a deeper truth, that ends and means cannot be separated. Every choice, every action shapes not only the outcome, but the soul of the one who acts. A good achieved through cruelty carries the residue of that cruelty within it. Likewise, a sacrifice born of compassion can ennoble even a painful result. Take a quiet breath and think of the choices that weigh on you. The lies told to protect, the silences kept to spare others pain, the costs you quietly accepted for what you thought was right. Maybe the question isn't whether the ends justify the means, but whether the person who made the choice can live with what they've become. And if morality itself can fracture under the weight of consequence, the next question surfaces through the haze. Why does a universe capable of such good allow suffering at all?
The problem of suffering. Somewhere, right now, a child cries out in pain. A person takes their final breath alone. A world built with such astonishing order still trembles with suffering that feels senseless and cruel. If the universe has meaning, if goodness exists at its core, why does it allow such unbearable pain? This is the problem of suffering, one of the oldest and darkest puzzles in philosophy and theology. It asks how a world so intricate, so full of beauty and life, can coexist with horror. How can a supposedly benevolent or rational universe permit the innocent to suffer, while the wicked thrive? Religious traditions have wrestled with this contradiction for millennia. In the book of Job, a righteous man endures unspeakable agony and loss, not as punishment, but as a test of faith. His story offers no tidy resolution, only the haunting truth that suffering might be beyond human comprehension. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? God asks, suggesting that divine perspective may exist beyond morality as we understand it. Others reject this mystery entirely. Philosophers like Epicurus argued that the existence of suffering disproves divine perfection. If a God is willing to prevent evil but not able, it lacks power. If able but not willing, it lacks goodness. If both, why does evil persist? The question, simple and devastating, echoes through centuries of human thought. Science offers its own explanation: indifference. The universe, it says, is not moral at all. It does not care who suffers or why. Pain exists because the mechanisms of life demand it. Evolution thrives on struggle. Existence feeds on decay. From that perspective, suffering isn't a flaw in the design. It is the design. But this view, too, feels incomplete. For even in the darkest moments, humans respond to suffering with compassion. Pain calls forth empathy, resilience, meaning. It's as if within the very machinery of despair lies the potential for transcendence, the possibility that awareness itself is born from the contrast between agony and peace. Perhaps suffering is the price of consciousness, the shadow cast by awareness. Without it, joy would have no weight. Love would have no urgency. To exist at all might require the risk of pain. Still, for those living through it, no explanation can satisfy. The question persists because it isn't just intellectual, it's personal. It lives in hospital corridors, in war zones, in moments of private loss. It lives wherever hope struggles to make sense of pain. Take a moment to feel the silence behind the question. Maybe suffering doesn't prove the absence of meaning, but its depth. That the universe is not cruel, but incomprehensibly complex. That pain, in some unreachable way, is part of a story still being written. And if suffering exists at the heart of all creation, the next question emerges like a faint voice in the quiet. Are we ever truly free to choose good, or are even our virtues shaped by forces beyond our control?
Are we free to choose good? When you choose to do the right thing, help a stranger, tell the truth, forgive, does it feel like a decision born of freedom or something deeper? Something that was always going to happen that way? This question, deceptively simple, cuts to the core of morality itself. Are we free to choose good? Or are we bound by forces we barely understand? Biology, upbringing, destiny, even divine design. The idea of moral freedom, the power to choose between right and wrong, is essential to how we see ourselves. Without it, praise and blame lose meaning. A saint without choice is just a machine programmed to love. A sinner without choice is a victim of fate. Yet, philosophers have long debated whether genuine freedom even exists. If every thought, every impulse is the product of neurons firing according to the laws of physics, where does choice fit in? When you decide to help someone in need, was that decision truly yours or just the inevitable outcome of causes stretching back before your birth? Some argue that morality depends on freedom, that goodness must be voluntary to have value. Others believe that even if everything is determined, moral behavior can still matter because compassion and justice remain part of that very determination. In other words, perhaps we don't choose goodness, but we become it through the way the universe unfolds. Theologians wrestle with this tension too. If an all-knowing God foresees every action, can humans truly act otherwise? The question haunted Augustine and later Luther. How can divine omniscience coexist with human freedom? Some found solace in mystery, others in paradox, freedom existing within inevitability like a flame flickering inside glass. But maybe the question isn't whether we are free to choose good, but whether goodness itself is something that can be chosen at all. When compassion arises, it feels less like calculation and more like recognition, as though goodness is something remembered rather than decided. Maybe moral action isn't freedom's triumph, but awareness's awakening. Take a moment and imagine every moment of kindness you've ever witnessed, not deliberate strategy, but instinct, like light reaching into darkness. Perhaps goodness is not something we decide to do, but something that happens through us when we remember what we already are. And if choosing good depends on forces beyond will or reason,
The next question follows naturally from that glow. Is mercy a virtue or the price we pay for understanding how fragile we all truly are?
The price of mercy feels divine when you receive it and dangerous when you give it. To forgive someone who's done wrong seems noble, even beautiful. But every act of mercy carries a cost. When we forgive, justice bends. When we pardon, someone else's suffering may go unanswered. And so we arrive at one of the oldest moral dilemmas. Can mercy and justice truly coexist, or does one destroy the other? From ancient law to modern ethics, the tension between punishment and forgiveness has defined civilizations. In a just world, wrongs demand consequence. In a merciful one, compassion demands restraint. The challenge lies in how much forgiveness a society or an individual can bear before fairness collapses. Consider a simple example. A thief steals to feed his starving family. Justice says he must pay for his crime. Mercy says he should be understood, perhaps even freed. Whichever choice we make feels incomplete. Punishment seems cruel. Forgiveness seems unjust. And in that uneasy space between the two, humanity lives, constantly choosing which value to betray. Philosophers and theologians have wrestled with this paradox for centuries. In Christianity, mercy is divine, but it doesn't erase justice. It fulfills it through sacrifice. In secular ethics, mercy can be seen as weakness, an emotion that undermines fairness. Yet history shows that pure justice, without compassion, quickly becomes tyranny. The guillotine, after all, once fell in the name of equality. Mercy complicates morality because it demands something unnatural, the willingness to let go of retribution. It requires empathy strong enough to see the offender not as a monster, but as a mirror, someone capable of the same failures we hide within ourselves. But mercy also risks corruption. Too much forgiveness can invite harm. It can let injustice breathe, teach the guilty that their actions carry no weight. The philosopher Nietzsche warned that mercy, if abused, can become a tool for the powerful to appear virtuous while leaving real suffering unresolved. Mercy must therefore walk a narrow edge, soft enough to heal, firm enough to protect. Take a quiet breath and imagine someone who wronged you deeply. To forgive them doesn't erase what happened, it transforms what it means. Mercy doesn't rewrite history, it reshapes the soul. It demands strength, not surrender. It's not the opposite of justice, but its most difficult expression, choosing compassion when you could choose control. And if mercy costs so much, the next question rises like a whisper from that same light. What happens when life itself never ends, when justice, mercy, and meaning must stretch across eternity?
The ethics of eternal life. To live forever, at first, it sounds like a gift beyond measure. No sickness, no aging, no death. Time itself becomes your companion. You could learn everything, see everything, love endlessly, without the fear of loss. But somewhere beneath that dream lies a deeper, more unsettling question. Would immortality be moral? The ethics of eternal life reach far beyond personal desire. Immortality, after all, would reshape everything we know about value, meaning, and the human soul. Part of what makes life precious is its impermanence. Every moment burns brighter because it will never return. Every goodbye, every fading sunset reminds us that our time is limited, and that limitation gives meaning to choice. Remove death, and the clock stops ticking, but so too might urgency, gratitude, even love. What would it mean to care deeply in a world where nothing can truly be lost? Some philosophers argue that immortality could erode morality itself. If actions no longer carry the weight of finality, would consequences still matter? Imagine an immortal being, endlessly powerful, endlessly knowledgeable, but untouched by time or guilt. Without mortality, could compassion survive? Could forgiveness mean anything if there were always more time to make amends? But there's another side to this dilemma. If mortality limits goodness, perhaps eternity could perfect it. In infinite time, every mistake could be corrected, every flaw refined. The philosopher Bernard Williams once asked whether immortality would eventually collapse into boredom, but others counter that eternal existence might allow infinite moral growth. Perhaps eternity isn't a trap, it's a test. Still, such a world would come at a cost. Eternal beings might hoard life while others perish. Resources would dwindle, humanity would fracture between those who can die and those who cannot. Would the gift of immortality justify the suffering it creates? Could an eternal life ever coexist ethically with the finite ones that make it possible? And then there's the quiet horror, eternity itself. The unending accumulation of memory, the weight of centuries pressing down on a consciousness that cannot forget. Over time, even joy might decay into exhaustion. To live forever may not be to triumph over death, but to be trapped in a slow death of meaning. Take a moment and imagine eternity stretching before you. No end, no escape. Would you still be you after 10,000 years? Would compassion fade? Would curiosity survive? Perhaps the ethical question of immortality isn't whether we can live forever, but whether we should. And if living forever risks hollowing out the meaning of life itself, the next question waits quietly in its shadow. How much is a single mortal life truly worth? The value of a single life. When a single life ends, the world doesn't stop. The sun still rises, rivers still flow. Somewhere, laughter continues. Yet for those who knew that person, reality fractures. Something vast and irreplaceable disappears. The paradox is haunting. One life seems infinitely valuable, yet from a distance, it's barely a ripple in an indifferent sea. So what is a single life truly worth? For centuries, philosophers and theologians have struggled with this question. Religion often answers with absolutes, that every human life is sacred, imbued with divine purpose, infinite in worth. But philosophy, and sometimes life itself, offers a crueler mirror. History counts bodies in wars, pandemics, and disasters, reducing individuals to numbers. Governments measure life in statistics. Economists assign it monetary value when weighing safety regulations or medical costs. The idea feels monstrous, yet society quietly depends on it. Utilitarianism, for instance, asks us to think in terms of outcomes. How much happiness or suffering results from each decision? From that perspective, the loss of one person might be justified if it prevents greater harm. But how can we quantify a consciousness, a unique mind that has never existed before and will never exist again? If one life is traded for many, is it truly less or simply different in kind? The question cuts deeper when viewed personally. If it were your child, your friend, your love, no number could outweigh their worth. Yet when the suffering belongs to strangers halfway across the world, empathy falters. Our moral vision, it seems, narrows with distance. Philosopher Peter Singer calls this the expanding circle problem. Compassion grows weaker the farther we stand from another's pain. And yet, there's another way to see it. Perhaps value doesn't lie in numbers or divine decrees, but in connection. A single life gains meaning not from its duration or global impact, but in its capacity to touch others, to ripple through consciousness itself. Every word spoken, every kindness shown, every small act of care reshapes the invisible fabric of the world. Take a moment to imagine every person you've met, however briefly. Each carried an entire universe within them. Memories, fears, laughter, dreams, worlds that vanished when they did. Perhaps the true worth of a life lies not in scale, but in depth, in the infinite interiority of a single consciousness. Even if the cosmos forgets, existence itself remembers, because to live, even once, is to alter reality forever. And if every life carries infinite weight, then the next question emerges from that fragile glow. Can truth itself exist without the minds that believe in it?
Can truth exist without belief? Somewhere, light travels across the void, billions of years old. Whether or not anyone ever sees it, it still moves, indifferent, eternal. That light holds truths about distant stars that no mind may ever discover, which leads to a quiet, unsettling question. Can truth exist without belief? To most of us, truth feels inseparable from awareness. Something must know the truth for it to matter. Yet philosophers have long debated whether truth depends on the mind or whether it exists independently, like a law carved into the structure of the universe itself. In the ancient world, Plato imagined truth as an ideal realm, perfect, timeless, untouched by human perception. To him, our beliefs are merely shadows of that higher reality, flickering on the cave wall of our limited senses. But centuries later, other thinkers would challenge that idea. Nietzsche, for example, claimed that truth is not discovered, it's constructed. He called it a mobile army of metaphors, born from language, culture, and human need. What we call truth might not be nothing more than consensus, shared illusion. So which is it? Does truth stand alone, waiting to be found, or does it exist only where consciousness casts its light? Imagine a world without observers, no eyes to see, no minds to think. Would facts still be facts? Would 2 plus 2 equals 4 remain true in a universe devoid of thought? Some say yes, that truth is objective, woven into the logic of being itself. Others argue that without a mind to understand or apply it, truth becomes meaningless, like a book written in a language no one can read. And perhaps both are right. Maybe truth, like light, exists in two forms, potential and revealed. It can exist silently in the dark, but it only becomes truth when it's recognized. A law of physics may hold long before any scientist names it, but its meaning emerges only through discovery. In that way, belief doesn't create truth, but awakens it. Yet there's a deeper paradox. If all truth is independent of belief, then meaning might not matter at all. The universe could be filled with infinite facts, but without minds to witness them, they would remain cold and silent. True, but utterly void of significance. If truth depends on belief, then reality becomes fragile, reshaped each time a mind chooses to see differently. In either case, certainty slips through our fingers. Take a moment to consider that everything you know might not need you to exist. Every law, every constant, every truth may already be there, vast and indifferent,
whether you ever believe it or not. Or maybe, just maybe, truth is not a property of the universe, but a reflection of your own awareness shimmering against it. And if truth itself might exist without minds to perceive it, the next question follows like an echo through the void. How far can reason go before it collapses into infinite doubt? The infinite regress of reason. Every belief you hold, every conviction, every certainty stands on something. You believe what you do because of a reason, but that reason depends on another, and that one on another still. Follow this chain far enough, and you encounter one of philosophy's most haunting riddles, the infinite regress of reason. When you say something is true, you must have a justification for it. But if that justification also needs a reason, and that reason another, where does it end? If every belief demands support from another, reason seems trapped in a circle, or worse, an infinite fall through thought itself. Philosophers have struggled with this abyss for millennia. Aristotle called for a foundation, a set of self-evident truths that need no further proof. Descartes sought certainty in the act of thinking itself. I think, therefore I am. But even that statement, when questioned, begins to tremble. Why should thought guarantee existence? Why should logic, born from human minds, applied to the universe at all? The regress exposes a quiet paradox at the heart of reason. To stop the infinite chain, you must believe something without proof. Every worldview, scientific, religious, or skeptical, rests on an unprovable foundation. For science, it might be the assumption that nature is consistent and observable. For faith, it might be that God or morality is real. Even the skeptic must assume logic is trustworthy to doubt anything at all. So in the end, every rational structure stands on an irrational ground, a leap of faith, disguised as certainty. It's unsettling, but it may also be necessary. Without an endpoint, reason would never act. You would question every premise forever, unable to decide, unable to move. The infinite regress doesn't destroy truth, it reveals the humility within it. And yet that realization leaves a lingering discomfort. What if our entire understanding of the world is a grand architecture built on assumptions too fragile to bear its weight? Every thought, every discovery, every truth could be part of an endless scaffolding, beautiful, intricate, and ultimately baseless. Take a quiet moment and imagine descending that staircase of reasoning, step by step, each why leading to another. Would you ever find the floor, or would the staircase fold back on itself, trapping you in eternal curiosity? And if every reason demands another behind it, the next question rises naturally from that abyss. How can we ever know what is real if our knowledge is only a map and never the territory itself?
The map and the territory. You carry one inside you, a map of the world. It's made of memories, beliefs, and perceptions. It guides every decision you make, every assumption about what's true. But the unsettling question remains, what if the map isn't the territory? The phrase comes from the philosopher and scientist Alfred Korzybski, who warned that our understanding of the world is never the world itself. The map, a symbol of language, thought, or model, is useful, but it's not reality. It's a representation, a simplification, a translation filtered through the limits of the human mind. Your thoughts about love are not love. Your idea of justice is not justice. Even your concept of you
is a rough sketch drawn from experience and memory. We navigate life not by the territory of truth, but by maps, fragile, partial, endlessly redrawn. But here's the problem. The more accurate a map becomes, the larger and more complex it grows. A perfect map, one that captures every grain of sand, every atom, every gust of wind, would be identical to the world itself, and therefore useless. So we simplify, we compress, we filter. Every act of understanding is also an act of forgetting. Language is one of the most powerful maps we have. It lets us describe mountains, dreams, galaxies, grief. But language can also trap us. Words turn fluid experiences into fixed symbols. They make the living world seem solid, categorical, certain. Tree, freedom, truth. Each word hides infinite complexity behind its label. When we mistake the label for the thing, the map for the territory, we stop seeing the world itself. Philosophers of perception, like Kant, believed that we never experience reality directly. We see through the lens of our minds, through filters shaped by evolution and expectation. What you perceive isn't the territory of the world, but your brain's internal reconstruction of it. The real world may lie forever out of reach, hidden behind the map of perception. And yet, without maps, we'd be lost. Science, art, religion, and philosophy, they're all ways of mapping existence, even imperfectly. Perhaps the goal isn't to escape the map, but to remember it's only a guide, to keep adjusting it as we learn more, to stay humble before the mystery it can never fully capture. Take a quiet breath and imagine your own map, the beliefs and meanings that define your world. What parts are clear and detailed? What parts are blank, marked only by the phrase, "Here be dragons"? And if every map is only a shadow of the truth, the next question rises from that uncertainty: does the act of observing the world change what the world truly is?
The observer effect. Every time you look at the world looks back. The act of observation is never neutral. It changes what is seen, and sometimes what is. This strange and humbling idea is known as the observer effect. In physics, this began as a practical problem. Scientists studying subatomic particles discovered that simply observing them changed their behavior. Light used to measure an electron's position also pushed it, altering the result. What they found was unnerving. Reality at the smallest scales seemed to depend on whether it was being watched. In quantum mechanics, this evolved into a deeper paradox. A particle doesn't exist in one state or another until it's observed. It exists in a superposition of possibilities. The instant someone looks, the wave collapses, and one outcome becomes real. Does that mean reality requires observers to exist? Or does observation merely reveal one of many hidden possibilities? But the observer effect isn't limited to physics. It touches consciousness, ethics, and even self-awareness. The moment you reflect on yourself, you change yourself. The act of noticing your thoughts reshapes them. You are both the experimenter and the experiment, the watcher and the watched. Think about how you behave when you know someone is watching versus when you're alone. The gaze, whether human or divine, changes behavior, intention, even emotion. Philosopher Michel Foucault described this through the metaphor of the panopticon, a circular prison where one guard could see every prisoner, but the prisoners could never know when they were being observed. Eventually, they began to police themselves. Observation became
control. Yet observation can also create awareness. The observer effect might be less about control and more about relationship. Maybe the universe isn't a cold mechanism, but a mirror, a web of perception where being observed and existing are intertwined. When consciousness looks upon reality, it gives it shape, and in turn, reality gives consciousness its reflection. Take a moment to imagine this. Every time you look at the world, at the sky, a tree, another face, the universe subtly rearranges itself to meet your gaze. You're not separate from reality. You're a participant in its unfolding. Observation isn't passive, it's creative. You are part of what makes the world real. And if every act of observation reshapes what is seen, the next question flickers softly in the dark. What happens when the act of knowing itself begins to collapse, and knowledge can no longer tell us what is real?
When knowledge collapses, there's a moment, quiet and terrifying, when everything you thought you knew begins to unravel. When the foundations of certainty tremble and the world becomes strange again. What happens when knowledge collapses? We imagine knowledge as a fortress, solid, secure, built brick by brick through observation, reason, and memory. But history tells a different story. Knowledge is not a fortress, it's a scaffolding, temporary, fragile, constantly rebuilt on the ruins of what came before. Every age believes its truths are final. Every age is eventually proven wrong. The Earth was once the center of the cosmos. Disease came from bad air. Space was empty. Time was absolute. One by one, these certainties shattered, not because the world changed, but because our understanding did. Each collapse brought us closer to truth, yet also reminded us how easily we mistake our models for reality. But the collapse of knowledge isn't only historical, it's personal. It happens in small ways, every day. The moment you realize someone you trusted deceived you, the instant a long-held belief turns to dust. The quiet recognition that the story you told yourself about who you are might never have been true. Each collapse hurts because knowledge isn't just information, it's identity. When it crumbles, so do we. And yet there's something sacred in that breaking. To see knowledge fail is to glimpse its limits, to be reminded that what we know is always provisional, always conditional, always incomplete. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said that understanding is like climbing a ladder you must throw away after reaching the top. The purpose of knowledge, perhaps, isn't to end uncertainty, but to refine it, to reach a higher kind of unknowing. In a universe that defies total comprehension, maybe knowledge isn't the goal at all. Maybe what matters is the search, the act of looking, questioning, learning, and losing again. When we cling to certainty, we freeze the flow of discovery. But when we accept collapse as part of the cycle, knowledge becomes alive, something that grows by dying. Take a quiet breath and imagine every truth you hold gently slipping from your hands. The fear that follows isn't destruction, it's renewal. For in the silence that remains, something deeper emerges, the humility to keep wondering. And if knowledge itself can dissolve into mystery, the next question flickers like a whisper from the void. What happens when the search for truth ends, and you finally meet death face to face? What happens when you die? You will die. That fact sits quietly at the center of every life, waiting. You can ignore it, debate it, dress it in ritual or science, but you cannot escape it.
What happens after that the moment the mind goes silent, is the oldest question humanity has ever asked, and perhaps the one it fears most. To die seems, at first glance, to mean the end, the shutting down of consciousness, the unraveling of memory, the scattering of everything that made you, you. The body cools, the neurons dim, the story concludes. Yet something strange lingers in the thought. If death is the end of experience, you will never experience it. From your point of view, the lights never go out, they simply fail to come back on. For centuries, philosophers have tried to reach across that silence. Epicurus dismissed the fear of death as an illusion. When we are, he wrote, death is not, and when death is, we are not. Others, like Heidegger, argued that awareness of death gives life its shape, that our mortality isn't a flaw, but the very thing that makes meaning possible. If you could live forever, choice would lose its weight, desire would lose its urgency. Only in the shadow of an ending does life burn brightly. Still, the question refuses to rest. Consciousness itself remains one of science's deepest mysteries. If thought arises from matter, how does it vanish so completely? And if it's more than matter, something fundamental, perhaps even universal, can it really end? Some thinkers, from ancient mystics to modern physicists, have suggested that consciousness might not die, but transform, reabsorbed into the cosmos like a drop returning to the sea. But there's another possibility, one more unsettling. What if consciousness can't end at all? What if the self, in some unbroken way, always finds itself awake, in an eternal now? No heaven, no hell, just awareness, endlessly facing itself. Some near-death experiences echo this, moments stretched into infinity, light that feels like remembering rather than discovery. Perhaps the question of death has no answer because it was never meant to be answered. Maybe the mystery is the point, the great reminder that existence isn't about control, but surrender, that meaning comes not from knowing what happens after, but from living fully before. Take a slow breath and imagine that final instant, the space between your last heartbeat and whatever follows. Maybe death is not an end at all, but a return to silence, to unity, to the place where questions no longer need being asked. And if death truly is transformation, the next question rises softly from that horizon. Can nothing ever truly exist, or is emptiness just another form of being?
Can nothing truly exist? Try to imagine nothing. No sound, no color, no space, no time, not even darkness, because darkness itself is still something. What you're trying to picture, what your mind is grasping for, doesn't exist. The moment you attempt to conceive of nothing, you've already failed, because to think of it is to make it something. So the question arises, can nothing truly exist? The idea of nothingness has haunted both science and philosophy since the beginning of thought. Ancient Greek philosophers debated it endlessly. Parmenides declared that nothing could not exist, because to speak of it, even to imagine it, is to give it being. What is not, he wrote, cannot be. His student Zeno tried to prove that even emptiness hides contradictions, that absence and existence are tangled like threads that can't be pulled apart. Centuries later, the question remains unsolved. In modern physics, even what we call empty space is anything but empty. The vacuum hums with quantum fields. Particles flicker in and out of existence. Nothing, it seems, is alive with restless potential. Energy, matter, and space-time itself may emerge from this ceaseless dance. But if nothing gives rise to something, was it ever truly nothing at all? Philosophically, the question goes deeper. Perhaps nothing cannot exist because it contradicts the nature of reality. To be aware of nothing, something must first be aware. To measure absence, there must be presence. Every definition of nothing is parasitic on something. In a way, nothingness might be the ultimate illusion, a mirror the universe holds up to itself to remember that it is. And yet the human mind keeps returning to it. There's a strange comfort in imagining absolute absence, the idea that everything could one day dissolve into stillness. For some, it represents annihilation. For others, peace. Mystics and Buddhists describe emptiness not as void, but as fullness, an infinite ground from which all things arise. In their view, nothing is not non-existence, but the potential for all existence. So perhaps nothing is never truly nothing. Perhaps even the absence of all things is filled with the memory of what could be. The vacuum vibrates, thought persists, meaning echoes. To imagine a universe where truly nothing exists might be impossible because that universe could not be imagined, observed, or known. The very act of asking destroys the nothingness you seek. Take a moment and sit with this contradiction, that nothingness, by its very definition, can never appear, and yet everything you see may have emerged from it. Maybe the secret of the universe isn't that something came from nothing, but that nothing was never empty to begin with. And if even nothing cannot truly exist, then the next question stirs gently in the depths of being itself. Would living forever, never returning to that nothingness, be a blessing or a curse?
Would immortality be a curse? The dream of living forever has followed humanity like a shadow. Myths call it a gift reserved for gods. Science fiction imagines it as the next step in evolution. And yet, hidden inside this dream lies a quiet horror. If you could live forever, never aging, never dying, would it be a blessing or a curse? At first, immortality feels like liberation. No fear of death, no ticking clock. Time becomes your servant. You could learn every language, master every art, walk every continent. You could witness history unfold, not as legend, but as memory. The early centuries would be intoxicating, a feast of knowledge and experience. But then, slowly, the curse begins to unfold. Imagine outliving everyone you love, watching empires rise and crumble, cities buried under new ones, the world forgetting your name again and again. You would become a ghost among the living, a creature of infinite memory in a world built on forgetting. The human heart wasn't made to endure eternity. It thrives on the rhythm of beginnings and endings. Without them, even joy would lose its taste. Philosophers have long warned that endless life might mean endless emptiness. Bernard Williams famously argued that immortality would destroy meaning itself. Every desire, once fulfilled infinitely, would fade into numb repetition. Even love, stretched over eternity, could dissolve into apathy. When nothing ends, nothing matters. Yet, others see it differently. Some say immortality wouldn't curse us, it would challenge us to evolve. Perhaps consciousness could deepen without end, learning new ways to experience wonder, new forms of purpose beyond the human. Maybe boredom isn't inevitable. Maybe it's just a stage in the metamorphosis of the eternal mind. But what if even evolution has limits? After 1 billion years, would you still recognize yourself? Would identity survive the erosion of time? Or would immortality become a slow death of memory, an eternity spent forgetting who you were? Perhaps the real curse of immortality isn't that it lasts forever, but that you don't. You change. You shed selves. You dissolve into history. What continues might not be you at all, but a sequence of strangers wearing your name. Take a quiet breath and imagine living through 10,000 years, a million years, the death of stars. Would you still long for life, or would you finally crave its opposite? Immortality promises eternity, but it steals the one thing that gives life meaning, its end. And if eternity robs life of its meaning, the next question flickers like a dying ember. What if meaning itself is the illusion we cannot bear to lose?
What if meaning itself is an illusion? Every thought you've ever had, every dream, every fear, every act of love or cruelty rests on a silent assumption that life means something, that beneath the chaos there's a pattern, that all this, the laughter, the suffering, the fleeting beauty, adds up to something real. But what if it doesn't? What if meaning itself is just a story consciousness tells to make existence bearable? Philosophers have wrestled with this question for centuries. The existentialists called it the void, the recognition that life has no inherent meaning, only the meanings we invent. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that humans are condemned to be free, forced to create purpose in a universe that offers none. Albert Camus saw this tension as the heart of the absurd, our desperate search for significance colliding with the cold indifference of reality. Yet this idea isn't new. Long before modern philosophy, Buddhist thought spoke of shunyata, emptiness, the notion that all things, including meaning, are empty of inherent essence. Everything depends on perspective, context, and relationship. Nothing stands alone, not even the idea of meaning itself. But here's the unsettling twist. Even the belief that meaning is an illusion still creates meaning. The mind refuses to rest in nothingness. It builds scaffolding from doubt itself, turning even despair into a narrative. To call something meaningless is already to interpret it, to assign it a role, even if that role is emptiness. Meaning is like gravity. It can never truly be escaped. It bends everything toward it, even the attempt to deny it. Still, the illusion of meaning might be the most necessary illusion of all. Without it, morality, art, and love dissolve into noise. Why care about justice if nothing matters? Why comfort the suffering if suffering has no weight? Even nihilism, when examined closely, depends on the values it seeks to reject. The act of rejecting meaning is itself meaningful. Take a moment to imagine a universe stripped of meaning. No good, no evil, no reason, no destiny. Just motion, matter, and time. It sounds unbearable, and yet perhaps there's freedom in that realization. If the universe offers no script, then every moment becomes a blank page. You are the author, not the actor. The story's meaning is yours to write. Maybe meaning is not something to find, but something to create, again and again, knowing it will fade. Maybe illusion isn't the enemy of truth, but the vessel through which life becomes bearable, even beautiful. And if meaning itself can dissolve into illusion, the final question emerges from that quiet emptiness. Why is there something, anything, rather than nothing at all? Why is there something rather than nothing? This is the question that swallows all others. Every mystery, consciousness, time, morality, death, depends on this one. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why does existence exist at all? It sounds simple, almost childlike, yet no mind has ever answered it. If there were truly nothing, no space, no energy, no law, no mind, then there would be no reason for anything to begin. And yet, here you are. Here we are.
Every breath you take defies the logic of nothingness. Philosophers, from Leibniz to Heidegger, called this the most fundamental question of all. Leibniz believed the answer lay in God, a necessary being whose existence could not be. But that answer only shifts the question, why should God exist rather than nothing? Why should anything? Others, like modern physicists, have tried to explain the universe as a product of quantum fluctuations, a spontaneous creation from the vacuum. But even that vacuum is something. The laws that allow such fluctuations to occur are still there. And so the question returns, eternal, unyielding. Perhaps there never was nothing. Perhaps existence is not a question that began, but a truth that always was. The philosopher Spinoza thought of reality as infinite and necessary, an eternal substance expressing itself as all things. Others believe that nothing is unstable, that non-existence cannot hold. The moment nothing tries to exist, it collapses into being. The void gives birth to form the way silence gives birth to sound. But maybe the question itself is flawed. To ask why assumes reason, and reason may itself be a product of the universe. Meaning might not apply to existence itself. The cosmos may not have a purpose. It may simply be. The ultimate mystery could be that there is no mystery, only the sheer fact of being, the unearned miracle of presence over absence. And yet, deep down, you can feel it, the impossible strangeness of everything that is. The warmth of your own skin, the sound of the air moving through the room, the stars burning in a silence they can never hear. Everything that exists, from atoms to thoughts, floats on the surface of a question that has no bottom. Take a slow breath. Let it remind you that you are part of the answer and part of the question. You are the universe, aware of itself for a moment, wondering why it exists at all. Maybe that wonder is the answer. Maybe existence needs no justification, only awareness to make it real. And so, as the final thought drifts into quiet, perhaps the deepest mystery isn't why there is something rather than nothing, but how nothing ever thought to ask.
Some questions don't lead to answers. They lead to mirrors, reflecting the fragile boundary between what you know and what you'll never understand. Across these hours, you've wandered through illusions, paradoxes, and the quiet terror of existence itself. And maybe, somewhere between the questions, you felt something shift, not in the world outside you, but in the one within. If these thoughts linger with you tonight, let them. Curiosity is the only candle that burns even in the darkest corners of the mind. Thank you for listening, for wondering, for staying until the end. If you'd like to keep exploring the mysteries that shape what it means to be human, subscribe, leave a comment, and share which question stayed with you the longest. Until next time, sleep well and keep asking.